Hello. Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whenever you are. Hello. And sending you all kinds of good vibes on this day. I just fell off my chair. Just like this much awkward, just to like keep it fun and light. Welcome to Astrology and Coffee, where I do have coffee that I usually don't drink. Hopefully you're nice and cozy as we settle in for yet another one of these wonderful discussions. I have so enjoyed doing these weekly deep dives into just a couple transits. I know I've learned a lot. It's been really clarifying, I want to say, to like work with these energies in real time. So I thank you so much for tuning into these and for joining me for these discussions. Look at you helping to make this happen. I learned early on that I show up way better when I got people on the other end of what I'm doing. Just sitting down like to write a book or something like that. Like there's nobody like immediately on the other end. So it's a little bit more challenging for me. But like knowing that you guys are here and that you're gonna see this definitely helps me to bring my A game. Hello, good morning. So glad you guys are here. So I'm super excited about today's topics. Both of them are happening next week, so very timely in that sense, but both of the things that we're going to talk about are very long, kind of overarching transits that aren't just like one day is the height of it. They're very much things that are going to unfold for about the next 6 months. So, of course, we are talking about the new moon solar eclipse in Taurus happening on April 30th at 10 degrees Taurus. And Pluto goes retrograde in Capricorn at the very end of Capricorn there the day before that on April 29th, and then stays retrograde through October 8th. So these two transits are happening both in Earth, just like really a little extra dose of awkward this morning, which, I'm finding to be enjoyable. So, anywho, both of these transits are happening in Earth signs. So obviously the new moon solar eclipse is happening in Taurus, and that's supposed to play out for a good long while. And then we have Pluto retrograde going retrograde in Capricorn, another Earth sign. So this talk is very grounded in Earth energy and very much keeping that at the center of this conversation today, because I think all of it ties together so well, as I hope you will see, as far as these changes that are happening inside us, that we can feel, that our consciousness is expanding, our old wounds are healing. I mean, there's so many things happening inside of us right now. There's big energy doing all kinds of upgrades inside of us. And then these big upgrades that are happening emotionally and mentally and energetically, they take time, like a good big long chunk of time in some cases, to filter out into the earth realm, where things only happen one step at a time. There's a process, there's an unfolding, there's a physical clicking together of all of the components that happens in the earth part of things that takes a while for all of that to unfold. So that's the part, though, where we quote unquote make it real. I've mentioned Stephen Forrest's books many times, and he has his Element series. The one that we're talking about today will be from the Book of Earth, where he goes in depth into all of these archetypes surrounding Earth energy, the planets that rule those signs, the houses that they're commonly associated with. And in the Book of Earth, he's talking about basically taking what all of the other elements are bringing to the table, and Earth energy makes it real. So when we're talking about manifestation, or really anything that we ever want in our lives, either something new that we want, or there's something that we want to change, or anything that we want to change in the physical landscape of our reality, we are now dabbling into Earth energy. And that is what the rest of today's conversation is going to be about. So I am so excited to ground into this conversation. I have a good dose of earth energy in my own chart. And one of my favorite things to do just in astrology in general is to take the things that people like usually don't like, or like maybe have bad reputations, or like they give Taurus a hard time because they're stubborn, and they give Capricorn a hard time because they're boring, and they give Virgo a hard time because they're nitpicky and won't ever stop criticizing me, on and on and on. Like all of these things that every single zodiac sign can end up with a like a one-sided reputation. Like that's just one facet of that energy, right? And usually it's taking it at surface level and not really appreciating the depth of what these three signs do. When you really get into the mechanics of like, without them, we would all be starving and non-existent. So yeah, it's a trip to like really get into the boring earth energy side of things. So that's what we're going to do. The new moon solar eclipse, these are just kind of some high level takeaways as far as uh, like my goal is to give you guys like half hour here at the beginning, if that, maybe shorter, of an overview of the whole entire time. And then if you have time to dig into the archetypes and the specifics behind it, because usually that'll trigger little thoughts and insights that you have in your own mind as you listen. That's great. But really, like the core essence of what I'm going to share will be here in the first half hour. So if you're ever short on time, just trust that, if you can't make it for the rest of it, save it for another time. No big deal. So the new moon solar eclipse in Taurus, April 30th at 10 degrees. These are new beginnings, realizing them internally. Like the new moon part is the intention setting part. So the solar eclipse is typically where we inside of ourselves come to a new awareness or understanding or level of clarity around our own desire. Like to make anything in the earth realm, you have to first be able to see it and conceive of it inside of your mind. And so this new moon solar eclipse is set to bring about new waves of clarity and new images of what is it even that you want, because if you can't see it in your mind, you can't create it in earth reality. So this is a great time for getting those divine inspirations and downloads and ideas. And because we're in the sign of Taurus, I see this being a lot around wanting a deeper sense of peace, or feeling like even if you have enough money, that there's still a level of security that's missing. That you're wanting greater autonomy and self-reliance. Like, again, even if you're in a situation where all of your needs are met, if it's somebody else doing the meeting of the needs, like AKA you are physically dependent on somebody else meeting your needs for you, again, I think these shifts and these new waves of clarity are going to be around that, as far as like wanting, truly desiring to be self-sufficient and know down in your bones that like you will always be okay, because you will always have yourself. You can always count on you because you are the only one who never leaves. Everybody else is subject to a temporary status within your experience. So if you are relying on somebody to meet your needs, like I'm not dissing cooperation. There are lots of cooperative situations where, I contribute this and you contribute this, and through our partnership, we both have our needs met. Like I'm not saying that can't be how it is. But, and I mean, I think each person will know in your own reality, like what is the actual circumstance that this is playing out in. And that's something I wanted to mention as far as like looking in your chart at where do you have 10 degrees of Taurus situated, like in what house, I mean. And that is where the sun and the moon are going to come together and create this solar eclipse. So that house, yes, we're talking about Taurus and our security and all of that, but also that house is likely to have a piece of the puzzle as far as like where these changes are likely to land in your life. Oh, the upward spiral. So Irene says she has natal Mercury at 8 degrees, is it important regarding the eclipse? So I would say kind of stretch that out to any Taurus placements. Uh, they are being activated, I think you could say, as part of this energetic imprint that is landing exactly on the 30th. So any of your Taurus placements are being lit up by this like double luminary in the sign of Taurus. That's bringing our masculine light, the sun, and our feminine light, the moon, all to the sign of Taurus. So even if, I mean, yes, if the closer the planets are to that 10-degree point, like that's kind of the more impactful. But I would say even if you have something as far inside the sign of Taurus, like you're all the way at 2059, but it's still in Taurus, I would say that's still going to feel it, like that placement in your chart. The other thing I wanted to say, so those are Taurus placements, but also Scorpio placements. Holy moly, look out, Scorpio placements. Like, dude, I mean that with love. But this is a time where, again, like you have the light and the sun and the moon shining onto this sign of Scorpio, creating oppositions with any of your natal Scorpio placements. Likewise, not quite as extreme, but very similar in vibration would be any Leo or Aquarius planets that you have in your natal chart, because this new moon will be creating squares to Leo and Aquarius. So that's the fixed signs. Those are the 4 fixed signs. So anytime you have an eclipse, you want to look at all of the signs of that modality to see, because like conjunctions, oppositions, and squares are the hard aspects. So if you have planets in these places, like they will come to the forefront, and that all by itself is inherently neutral. So like to your question, Irene, of like, it, I guess you asked, is it important? Yes, I would say it's going to make it a much more personal experience for you, especially when the planets that you have in those fixed signs are the personal planets. So like Mercury, Venus, Mars, even Jupiter to an extent, I would say like the sun and the moon also. Those planets in the fixed signs, again, it's just kind of an added level of intensity of how you're going to personally feel this eclipse. The other thing, though, is that this eclipse is also trining the other earth signs. So trines are positive, supportive aspects, and aspects in general, if you're not familiar, those are the crazy lines in the middle of the chart and basically represent a conversation between all of the different things that are within range of having a conversation. And the range, like the different colored lines and all of that, is like how well do they hear each other? What is the tone of that conversation? Like a square, for example, squares are represented by Mars, the energy of Mars, just meaning that squares are very combative. So it's like if you're at a restaurant, like all the way across the restaurant, maybe you can't hear exactly what they're saying, but if there's somebody having an argument over there, you can hear they're fighting. Like, that. You don't have to hear what's going on, like specifically the words, to be able to know that the tone of that conversation is heated. And so squares and oppositions and even conjunctions, they're the ones that can get heated. So that's why I say that. But even, this eclipse, it's happening in an earth sign. And so it's going to be also lighting up in a positive, supportive way anything that you have in Virgo and Capricorn. And this is just to kind of start to illuminate that, like, you can take that eclipse that's happening in Taurus as this example and use every single aspect in the book. Like, you could say it's also going to sextile Pisces and Cancer, which is another supportive aspect. So like, it can get really overwhelming really quickly, but that's why I say, like, if you can at least locate where 10 degrees Taurus is in your chart and look at that house, because that is really the primary place that you're going to see these changes unfold. Like, for example, I have Taurus in my first house. So like this entire series of eclipses, we're going to get into this in a little more detail when we talk about the eclipses here in a few minutes, but it's like they always stay on the same pair of sister signs as where the north and south node of the moon are located. And I say always with a big old asterisk on it, because sometimes not. So most of the time. So that means that, like, this is only the second of the Taurus Scorpio eclipses. The first one was back in November of 2021. And so really whatever houses you have Taurus and Scorpio, eclipses back and forth in these same houses in your chart for the next like year and a half until October 2023. So look at those houses because they're about to get an overhaul. They're gonna, see some changes, some big chapters closing, some big chapters beginning, like big changes. And depending on what house it's in, that's like kind of what area of your life are those changes bound to unfold. And again, there's lots of reasons why the entire chart is basically interconnected. So of course, like, you could have a career change, but because of that job change, you also had to move to a different state. And because of that, it's like there can be so many different ways where one change, especially an eclipse style change where it's a big one, can filter out to the rest of your chart. And that's what these aspects are telling you is like, it's kind of, I think that's a good spot to leave that. That you can see can unravel really quickly into the beautiful complexity that is astrology that, as far as I'm concerned, like is super fun to swim around in as long as we all can stay on the page of like, at a certain point, it is just for fun to play with this level of complexity, because I think applying it in a practical sense and like actually getting something helpful from this level of complexity is pretty far out there. That's why I really try to, as much as we do like to swim around in it, to try at least pull it back to something that's practical. So new beginnings that we're realizing inside of ourselves. And then also we'll talk about this next time or the time after, can't remember. But on May 16th, we have a full moon lunar eclipse. And those are said to bring external manifestations of the changes you've recently made in your life. Not like in the last 3 weeks, but like kind of the sum total of like who you are now. You will be manifesting new things that reflect who you are now. And that's on the full moon lunar eclipse that's happening mid-May. So as we think about like, this new moon is internal and it brings more endings than beginnings. It's more about like clearing the space so that there is an empty space for these new things to come in. It's not necessarily that like, as I said, the changes can take months, 6 months, whatever to unfold. That's a long time. It's not necessarily that the new thing that's coming to fill that open spot though is taking 6 months to get here. It could be that the new thing comes on the full moon 3 weeks from now, 2 weeks from now, whenever that is, and May 16th. And then it unfolds. It's like manifesting a relationship, for example. It's like the start of the relationship is barely even the manifestation compared to the chapter, the timeline and unfolding that's opened by beginning the relationship. Now the time can actually be spent together and the relationship can be co-created, and it lasts as long as it lasts. But you technically manifested the relationship, like let's say around this full moon lunar eclipse, but the manifestation itself could play out the rest of your life. So these are not small things. These are things that are going to take a lot of time to unfold, which is very fitting considering we are very much in the earth realm where everything takes time to unfold. The other transit that we're going to talk about that is also roughly 6 months long is Pluto retrograde in Capricorn. So Pluto has been in Capricorn since 2008. So this is a long transit, Pluto in Capricorn. Pluto is a generational planet because it moves so slowly. There are large chunks of the population who have the same Pluto sign. Like I think, 2008 to 2024 is when Pluto officially moves to Aquarius. So anybody born during those years has Pluto in Capricorn, and they'll carry this energy for the rest of their lives. That's why, like in your personal natal chart, especially with any of the generational planets, Pluto, Neptune, Chiron, Uranus, Chiron's not a planet, but you know what I mean. The houses that those are in your birth chart are even more explanatory in a lot of cases than the sign that it's in, because like literally everybody born for like 10 or 15 years like has that same Pluto placement or Neptune placement or whatever. but the house that it falls in for you is completely unique, and the way that it makes aspects to other planets is unique. So a lot of times, like in those generational planets, the house that it's in for you is really what we're talking about. So it's kind of the same thing, like find where the end of Pluto, the end of Capricorn falls in your chart. What house is that? And this Pluto retrograde that goes from April 29th through October 8th is likely to bring up some things, and we're going to get into like what things, but to bring up some things in that house. Like, so for me, 28 Capricorn is in my 10th house. So I've had a lot, Saturn and Pluto, in my 10th house for a couple years now. And transformation is basically Pluto's game, like death and rebirth all wrapped up into one cycle. One lap around includes both. It includes like dying, going to hell, walking through hell, like the only way out is through kind of thing, like getting through hell, and then you reemerge, you're reborn as a new being, new creature, new iteration of yourself, for sure. It's like the butterfly style transformation where the caterpillar goes into the cocoon, turns to goo, and then reforms as a butterfly and then exits the cocoon. It's like the caterpillar no longer exists. Like when you turn to goo, you're going to become a butterfly. You're not going to reform as a caterpillar. When you come out as a butterfly, there is no going back. There is no saying like, I think I want to be a caterpillar again. No, it doesn't work like that. There's only forward. So all of us, Pluto retrograde is basically like you're going into the cocoon a little bit, like maybe not to the point where your whole self is going to turn to goo, but probably some level of the house that Pluto is in right now for you, like so wherever 28 degrees Capricorn is, wherever that is in your chart, some form of that house may turn to goo a little bit. And houses generally represent areas of our life. They can also represent people in our life. So for example, let's say Pluto is in your 7th house, and it's not 7th house representing like committed partnerships. So let's say like it's more that represents the committed partners in your life then. So this turning to goo and metamorphosis and all of that, maybe it's not you, maybe it's your partner. So maybe it's your committed partner who is having an identity crisis or something like that. Since it's falling in your 7th house, that would be one such way I would think it could manifest. And the thing is though, and this is where, you know, I personally like to blend my spirituality with astrology in a really heavy way, because I personally believe that there is no such thing as like out there. There is no such thing as other people. There's only the reflection of you. And even though these other people are having an experience like that affects you and they seem separate, like all of that is kind of an illusion. For those of you who have watched the Heart to Heart episode that aired on the channel this week, that was a big one, and it's really got me thinking about all of this as we have all of this massive energy in Pisces right now, and it is sextiling both a lot of energy in Taurus and a lot of energy in Capricorn. So it's just a really awesome combination of like knowing our own divinity in a more profound way than we ever have before, and grounding it into the physical where stuff like that like isn't even supposed to exist, but like we're so inspired and lit up like that there's just new ideas flowing. And so this Pluto retrograde, in a nutshell, because Pluto represents power, I think we're going to get deeper into this obviously, but like I think a lot of Pluto is the power that we already have, the power that we've given away, that we do not currently possess because we've given it away, and somewhat the power that we possess that we don't really know how to operate. So there's like a whole range of power issues, like when it comes to like, who am I? Who am I allowed to be in the world? Like all of these questions kind of come back to, well, what is your sense of self-empowerment? Like basically what you're allowed to be in the world is a reflection of like, how powerful do you think you are? Like it's all, I was, oh gosh, I was listening to a podcast episode this morning that like just gave me this like opening and this clarity that was like, it is all inside me. All I have to do is claim it. Like it's all in there. It's just a matter of being able to open your mouth and saying, this is who I am. And that obviously is easier said than done. It's a process. But this Pluto retrograde, like it's a look back at how our current decisions to allocate power are manifesting. So like, up until this point, like being right now here today, we've made choices about I'm this powerful and allowed to do this, and I'm not allowed to do this because so and so blah blah blah. Like that's us giving them our power, even like to say, because the government, like giving the government your power, or law enforcement, or whatever the case is. There's all kinds of, we talk ourselves into being less powerful than we are. And so in Pluto retrograde, we begin seeing manifestations of existing power structures and receiving clarifying insight for how to restructure our lives in areas where our deepest self is craving more power. So that's a lot of words. What I mean is that I think with Pluto retrograde, we manifest oppression. We manifest people bossing us around or thinking that they can. We manifest our boss being awful to us and not appreciating us, taking us for granted, giving us shit work just because they can, like kind of abusing their power with us. We manifest all kinds of ways where on the surface, in the heat of the moment, the knee-jerk reaction may be to think, I'm powerless in this situation. This person has power over me and I'm suffering because of it. It's their fault. And every single one of those manifestations that comes up over the next 6 months is an opportunity to reclaim another little bit of your power. Put it back in there. Because every single person who shows up in your life, I believe, is a reflection of you. So if you think that they're holding your power, you gave it to them. So this is a concept that, again, I think it's pretty abstract, but when we get into the sense of like what house it falls in your chart, those power dynamics get a lot more clear. Like, for example, again, this is happening in my 10th house, and Pluto has been in my 10th house for like 6 years now. So that's really interesting because in that time, I became an entrepreneur. I then essentially stepped back from that and started a spiritual business, where 6 years ago, I wasn't even spiritual, let alone running a spiritual business. And so all of these transformations have happened step by step by step as I've granted myself permission to be more and more and more powerful. Like there was a time 6 years ago when I wouldn't even let myself quit my job because I didn't have anything lined up. And if I wasn't making money, how could I be saving? How could I be, preparing for my retirement? I was like 28 years old, like 27. Like, what am I, wow, like just living for this future that like may or may not ever get there. Like that was where I was. And so all of these little steps along the way have been me reclaiming my power. And as I've reclaimed my power, my career, my legacy, my, like my reputation, what I'm known for in the world, the work that I put out into the world, like all of that has, I mean, transformed, like doesn't even do it justice, but I guess in the sense that a caterpillar went in and a butterfly came out, like not in the sense that, the butterfly is beautiful and all of that, which I do enjoy my life so much more than I did 6 years ago, but in the sense that I am not who I once was. Like that is a permanent, irrevocable change that has unfolded. And now that I possess my power, I don't give it away like I used to. And so it's such a, like, I feel like spiritual growth is the work that we get to take with us from lifetime to lifetime to lifetime to lifetime. It's the stuff where they say like, well, you can't take it with you when you go. Like this, you can. When you reclaim your power, when you become fully empowered in this life, your soul is then in that state. And when you're in between lives, like in the non-physical space, in between life and or death and life, if you haven't read or listened to Dolores's canon, that was a really funny image of her with like an old fashioned cannon, and she's like shooting it off. Anyways, Dolores Cannon's book, Between Death and Life, it's about like what happens after you die and where do you go and what are you doing there and what kinds of review processes are there for the last lifetime and planning processes for the next lifetime, and like goes through all of that, which I just absolutely loved. But there is a permanence to the transformation of our soul that is building. And Pluto going through an earth sign especially is forcing these changes and this transformation that is rippling out into the physical world, like no matter what sign or what house Capricorn is in. Would love to do, yes. Heart to heart episodes are like some of my favorite to record. I would say like right at the top of my favorite list is the Patreon 4th Tuesday Sacred Circle, which is this upcoming Tuesday on April 26th. Check it out if you're not already in the Patreon. If you are, I'll see you Tuesday. Super excited for that. That interactive group setting has got to probably be my favorite, but those one-on-one conversations where we just get to talk and share our spiritual worldview as much as what we've figured out so far, like that's just so much fun. And I am open to and accepting basically like anybody who's interested in being in an episode of Heart to Heart, reach out to me and let me know. My email is owningauthenticity@gmail.com. There are 2 episodes up so far, so you can check that out and kind of see what the format of the conversation is. But just very open-ended discussions about basically living as the embodiment of love. Like that's really, I think, what it boils down to for me is, yes, we're talking about spirituality, but like what even is the point of spirituality? And for me, it's merging with my soul, and my soul exists at a frequency of unconditional love. So for me, spirituality is a set of practices and beliefs that allows me to perform the psychic hygiene on myself and raise my frequency on purpose to the level of my soul, which is unconditional love. So the practices that keep me feeling in love with life and excited to be here. That's how I've gathered and cultivated my own spiritual practice. And I love talking. I don't even care what their practice looks like. If they feel like on a regular basis, they're living in love with life and the experience of being on planet Earth in this paradise that is planet Earth, I want to talk to you. I want to talk to you and I want to hear your stories. So yeah, reach out to me if you're interested in being on an episode of Heart to Heart. Let's see. Yeah, I think that's a really good overview. So if you couldn't take in any more, you're getting basically the gist of what these next 6 months is. Powerful transformations internally that will absolutely, with time, ripple out into basically a whole new reality for all of us. And I would say it kind of comes back down to your personal level of mutability. Mutability being the mutable signs, so Pisces, Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius. And if you have heavy mutable energy, times like retrogrades and eclipses and all of that, I feel like there is maybe a greater likelihood of finding your way on top of the wave, like finding your way up onto surfing on this wave of change and rolling with the wave of change, which is what mutable is all about, is, accepting and embracing and adapting and quickly just reacting to whatever life is throwing at you. That's where mutable energy really shines. So as we encounter periods like the next 6 months where there may be lots of changes thrown at us, maybe sudden changes, especially when we start talking about eclipses, that your level of mutability will kind of like tell you how easy or challenging times like this can be. Like, for example, if you have every single planet in your natal chart, which is very rare, in that fixed column, so you have only planets in the fixed signs, Taurus, Scorpio, Leo, Aquarius, I can imagine like periods like the upcoming 6 months can be challenging. Maybe feel like pushing you faster than you want to go, or life is out of your control. There can be a lot of feelings around periods of change when you have heavily fixed energy. Um, and for that, honestly, I would point you to the second episode of Heart to Heart, where Maddie shares her infectious enthusiasm from the book of Breaking Loose from the Money Game, I think is what it's called. She can put it there in the chat for us. But basically this book is like, okay, so before we talk about money, first off, I need to tell you, nothing is real. Nothing is real. It's all just an illusion. And basically the takeaway, the bottom line, is that we are each an extension of God, source, the universe, whatever energy, infinite intelligence, whatever you want to think of it as, source. And we're all an extension of source, and that we are the center of our individual universe. And like basically that we are God in human form, and that we have created all of this because we ourselves as individuals are the God within our own universe. And that sounds pretty far out there, maybe, depending on where you're coming from. But I will say, like, since that conversation, which for me was about a week and a half ago, and then I rewatched it in full in one sitting on Tuesday. It's like 2.5 hours long. The actual conversation with Maddie was closer to 4 hours, and there's a bonus segment that will be coming out here in a couple of weeks. We just wanted to space it out, didn't want to release like a 4-hour conversation. But that conversation was so helpful for me personally, like on a deeply practical level. Like every single thing that I'm encountering at this point, like I'm like, I made that. Everybody is just playing their part in my movie. Like I scripted this. I told them what to say. I told them what to do. I needed this. And that's where I do want to pull it back to that example of like, let's say you have this eclipse in your, or sorry, let's say you have Capricorn in the 7th. And so Pluto is retrograding in your 7th house, and that deep metamorphosis is actually your partner. And I kind of got off track there with a tangent earlier, but like, if that's happening to your partner, if they're going through an identity crisis, like you could say it's happening in their life, but at the same time, like you yourself are manifesting a partner who is probably distant emotionally, is maybe inconsistent to who they used to be. They're kind of up in the air and upended. So there's a lot of uncertainty about the partnership and maybe the future of the relationship. So there are all kinds of ways where really it's still you manifesting their identity crisis, because it's all about how you feel about it, right? Like if you can weather that storm of them kind of pulling off into their own shell and doing their own thing and, creating their whole new identity, and like, you're really not a part of that they're having their own existential process, that distance and that separation is a manifestation that you yourself from inside your natal chart are manifesting in the space of relationships. And if it's making you uncomfortable, or if it's bringing up fears of losing that person, or I need to try to get them back, or I need to try to close this distance or work it out with them, or like I need to do something to fix this relationship with them, like that's still you having this manifestation versus manifesting the same exact thing and being like, oh, that's cool. I'm glad that they're figuring out, better who they are. And like, this is great. This gives me space to do the same and figure out who I am. And like, when it's the right time, of course, we'll come back together and we'll see where we landed. But in the meantime, I'm just going to let it flow. And most probably, if you're manifesting a Pluto retrograde in your 7th house, it's probably not going to be like that. It's probably going to be way more the first one, where it's bringing up fear of losing the person. What does that mean? Who am I if I don't have this relationship? Like all kinds of things, just because Pluto is that territory of deep fear and the underworld. So this can start to sound, I think, especially when we bring Pluto into the mix, it can start to sound a little bit gloomy, maybe, again, depending on where you're coming from. But I really don't mean it like that, because the outer planets, like Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus, and Chiron for that matter. It's like when we each come forward as being human, we manifest this vessel. It's like our first manifestation is our vessel that carries us, throughout our lives. And we have a lens of consciousness, and that lens is our unique energy, however our vessel is wired. And that lens through which our consciousness goes out into the world, like basically our personality, our filter of like that pure source consciousness compared to the individual named Carly in my example. So our lens that filters our consciousness, we come into this life. I personally use reincarnation in my belief set because it makes sense to me. If that's not where you are, that's no problem. But like for me, reincarnation, like when we come into this life, we're carrying emotionally everything that we've ever been, like every file memory of every emotion we've ever felt basically is stored within our body. And all of that like gunk is like smeared on our filter. So when we put pure source energy consciousness through our vessel and out into the world, that pure consciousness is distorted by the gunk on our filter, all of the past life things that we brought with us. And these outer planets, when they go through their retrogrades that are like 6 months at a time, once a year, so like that's like, spending a good big chunk of their time in retrograde, it's like a little bit more scraping the gunk off of the filter so that a more pure form of consciousness can come through your vessel. So when we're talking about shadow work, which is basically kind of the umbrella that I would say all of this falls under, we have to reevaluate. We have to learn. Like I was listening to a book yesterday called The Atlas of the Heart, which is Brene Brown's latest book, where she defines and catalogs 87 different emotions and experiences. And when I heard 87, I'm like, really? Like, how are there 87 emotions? Like, she's like, most people think there are three. There's like happy, mad, and sad. And there are 87 that she's choosing to include. She did research. There are other authors who have done like twice that many. She pared it down to only 87 to try to keep it as like streamlined as it could be. And so anyway, so she was talking about regret and how regret is actually an extremely necessary and productive emotion. And that is kind of like the heart of this Pluto retrograde vibe, I feel like, is we will be manifesting things that we do not like. Like there will be discomfort. That is like almost guaranteed with a Pluto retrograde, that like we will be facing our shadow in a good big way. And as those things come up, like in terms of the practical question of like, how do you release something? How do you like get that to transmute and like get it out of your system? I don't think it's as a direct effort as that. I think it's more like when those things come up and when we realize that we've, done something in the past that we're not particularly proud of, or yes, this person is like, my boss is taking advantage of me, but I'm pretty sure I'm the one that's never set a boundary in my life. Like maybe I have some part in this. Like you're realizing like, shit, I think I'm seeing like, yes, okay, I do have a part to play in this reality that I'm not enjoying. And the real work in shadow work, I believe, is compassion and bringing that compassion to yourself whenever something like that rises to the surface. And it's not necessarily about like being super active and I'm going to transmute this and I'm going to release it. It's more like, can I be with myself while I also realize that I suck at setting boundaries and that maybe everybody in my world is taking advantage of me because I'm letting them? And even worse, I don't know how to change it in this moment. I don't know how to be different. And instead of beating up on myself, I'm going to just be with myself. I'm going to acknowledge that, well, at least I know now. Like awareness, I say all the time, awareness is 98% of creating change. Like once you're aware, the rest of it basically falls in ways to like be compassionate with yourself while these things are bubbling to the surface. And it's actually in that compassion that, like, just to kind of the way I see the mechanics of it and how compassion actually works is like compassion is like the rag or whatnot, where like, so the hurt or the realization of like I'm not where I want to be or I'm not who I want to be like bubbles to the surface with the pain of knowing that there's this gap between where I am and where I want to be. And bringing compassion to the situation is like wiping and like comforting that pain, like letting it be there. It's not wrong. It is what it is. It rose to the surface in that moment. So it is. And I can be with it. I can bring compassion to myself and love myself, even though I'm not where I want to be. And in that act of bringing compassion, there's a softening. And in that softening, it's subtle, but that was release. That was like being compassionate with yourself instead of beating up on yourself. That was the transmutation. That was you feeling pain. And instead of being mad at yourself about the pain, you were flipping back to your dominant vibration of compassion and love that you would offer to anybody at any time. If they were hurting, of course, you would be compassionate towards them. But with ourselves, it can be so elusive. And so, like, the word transmutation or like thinking in shadow work, like you transmute your darkness into light, like that sounds so active. And really, I think it's a matter of a skill as far as like bringing compassion to a painful moment, letting yourself be in pain and loving yourself anyway. Um, I think that's kind of where we get into like the mastery of Pluto, which, by the way, I've like basically gone totally out of order on my notes, and I'm just going to go with it at this point. So Pluto was discovered in 1930. Some keywords: Lord of the Underworld, God of Hell, represents the unconscious mind and the collective unconscious. It also, like we said, has that life cycle within it of like dying, decay, death, rejuvenation, like fertilization, rebirth. Like there's both ends of the cycle included. Um, and it includes deep inner work. There are some astrologers who say Pluto represents kind of the base reason for the incarnation. So like the Pluto and Scorpio generation, for example, because that's where my placement is, we came forward as a group of souls. I think Pluto was in Scorpio maybe 1984 to 1995, I think. So that group of souls came forward with this wound in Scorpio, where basically in a past lifetime, like we had been deeply, deeply betrayed in the worst possible way that one human can betray another. That's the kind of betrayal that our souls are carrying. And so trusting another person is like all but impossible. But basically that's what we're here to redeem. We're here to like figure out how to trust again, how to let our guard down, how to be open to other people. And obviously, like that is very, very difficult when you've sustained a soul wound, like deep betrayal by someone that you love. Learning to trust again, yeah, it requires a whole nother lifetime. So Pluto and Scorpio, that's what we're here for. And so kind of like I've talked about with the nodes before, like no matter where the nodes are, they're still somewhat clearing the way for like your natal nodal placements. So the nodes right now are in Taurus and Scorpio, mine are in Virgo, Pisces. So like, even though I'm working on building my Taurus and purging my Scorpio along with the rest of the collective, I'm doing that towards the end of being able to live out building my Pisces and purging my Virgo. So that's my unique mission. Same with Pluto retrograde. It's like, even though Pluto's in Capricorn right now for the entire collective, the things that are coming up and the situations that are coming up, they're a lot tied into like just the next chapter of your own natal Pluto placement. So that's why, like, in conversations about Pluto retrograde, like, we talk really theoretically and kind of abstractly about it's going to bring up wounds and deep pain and maybe patterns that have been built out of deep pain and guardedness and protecting yourself and all of that. Like, when you think about like security, which, this is a little bit of a sidestep off of Pluto for a second, but like Scorpio is the planet that Pluto rules. Pluto's the modern ruler of Scorpio. So it's like, when you look at Scorpio and Taurus, I like to think about them as the power dynamic, or the power axis, the security axis. Taurus is very much the physical side of that, and Scorpio is the emotional side. And so when we think about Pluto as it relates to all of that, like, the lowest frequency of Pluto is extreme guardedness, where you need to protect yourself because you know that you've been hurt before, and like, it happened in the past and it's bound to happen again. So I'm going to take on this like really defensive posture and position. And when we do that, we close ourselves off from life, basically, from like the well-being that's always flowing and available to us. Like, we're now blocking it off because we're guarded against the world so that the world can't hurt us. And so in all of the shadow work that Pluto helps us do, that it like brings it to the surface for us, little by little, we are aiming to bring compassion to these old wounds. These maybe even back into multiple lifetimes ago that these wounds have been gathering in your psyche, in your soul. They will rise to the surface during a Pluto retrograde, and it is our work as spiritual beings, as loving extensions of God itself, to bring that energy to ourself. And I think this is where like the Pluto retrograde and the new moon eclipse in Taurus play really well together. That like, as we do our own healing, as we embody that within ourselves, it's almost like we become this walking permission slip for other people to both heal themselves and to embody who they really are, who their individual self really is. Like, I think a lot about authenticity, obviously, the name of my channel, and owning authenticity. And like, to me, the reason I feel like I reach for that as such a pillar of like my practical approach to what we're talking about here is like, when we boil ourselves down into like the most basic form of who we are, I believe you're left with your soul. You're left with your heart, and that is a pure extension of source energy, and that every single being coming forward had a unique reason that source wanted to exist like this. And so that's why you're here, because your version wanted to exist. And so encouraging people to find their authentic self is really saying, like, encouraging them to become empowered, encouraging them to find like, how can I grant myself as much power to be who my soul was originally coming forward to be? Like, how can I get out of my own way as much as possible? Like we're talking about with Pluto, other people only ever have power over us when we've given it to them. And like, this was kind of in the heart to heart episode the other day, where Maddie shared a quote about like, if you think a baby is a blank slate, then you've never met one, or something to that effect, I think was how it went. And I didn't respond in the moment, but that really got me thinking, because I think absolutely we're not a blank slate. I don't think any baby is a blank slate, but I do think in the 2 years that it takes for a baby to learn how to talk, that basically the conditioning has already taken over. Like, the fact that you can teach a baby sign language like tells me that like they're conditioning, like they're being conditioned from the second that they get here, basically. And so in this spiritual practice and in Pluto retrograde, especially, like we are unraveling all of the conditioning that we have picked up since getting here and using our power to stand more in the authenticity of who we really are. And so again, it's hard to like really narrow it down unless you have like what sign and what house your Pluto falls in, or what, sorry, yes, that in your natal chart, what sign and house your natal Pluto is in, but also what sign and how, or what house is 28 degrees Capricorn for you in your chart. We've talked a lot about the butterfly style transformation. That's very Plutonian, like the phoenix rising from the ashes, like the changes that Pluto brings. It's like the old version has to end all the way to ash. It no longer exists, or the goo of the butterfly or whatever. And then the new can be reborn. So especially when Pluto's in an earth sign, and especially where the bulk majority of humans on this planet are very physically focused, I would imagine Pluto changes and transformations evoke the most fear, because there's such a period of unknown. There's such a gap between here's the end of the old, and we have no idea what the hell is going to rise from the ashes. We don't know. Like there's no way to know that yet. But we can't find out until you let the old one burn all the way down. And so there's a lot of people who stay stuck in their lives because they're scared of transformations like that. They're like, show me the new one. And when I see that that one has what I want, then I'll let go of my old one. But until you show me this one, I'm not letting go of my old one. And it's like, yeah, it's like that quote of, it's really hard to cross the ocean if you're not willing to leave the shore. It's like that, like a Pluto transformation. Like you got to set sail off the shore, get out there to the middle of the ocean, and then maybe, you see what's going to come next. We don't know. It's going to unfold in the blank space that's left behind by wherever you just left. In doing this, anytime we're reclaiming our power, typically it's going to be brought through an experience where we are, I don't want to say forced, because kind of going back to that concept of we scripted our own movie, everyone's just saying what you told them to say, like everything's really happening right on time for the highest good of the all. But there will be moments where you come face to face with a harsh truth or a harsh reality that is difficult to accept. It's painful to accept. This was a quote from the next page, but I want to say it here. So this is from Stephen Forrest's Book of Water, but he says, and this is about Pluto, as a result of an intentional descent into hell, you will be happier in the future because you've rooted out underlying causes of unhappiness or dysfunction in your life. So it's like you could put a Band-Aid on a bullet wound, or you could get the bullet out of there and stitch it shut. Does it hurt way more to cut? Yeah, especially if you don't have any anesthesia. But putting a Band-Aid on it like doesn't help you. It doesn't do you or anybody around you any favors. It just keeps that pain and that wound open and raw all the time, versus doing the maybe painful work needed to actually reach a level of healing. Another good example of that is like going to therapy and doing the process where you tell your stories and you connect your dots and you get your narrative together on what happened to you and who it caused you to be. And like you do that work, not necessarily because it's fun, but because by doing the work, you're actually addressing the root cause of what even is happening in your life. Again, like why, to use the example of like people take advantage of me, or like, why do I feel like I always give and nobody gives me anything? Or like, if you feel like the balance of things in your life is out of whack, it's like, why is that? Well, chances are you're giving away your power. You're using your power to take care of everyone else, expecting that they're going to use their power to take care of you. And that is an equation that just usually doesn't work out. Our power is to help take care of ourselves. And when we're well taken care of, we can't help but give to others, because again, at the root of who we are is source unconditional love itself. So like when we're in a good spot, good shape, Like that's what ends up overflowing onto other people is like the unconditional love of source. So when we're talking about Pluto, like this calls into question our capacity for emotional discomfort. So like when it comes to Scorpio and Pluto, and a little bit the eighth house, like when we run into things that are emotionally uncomfortable for us, what is our response? Because if your initial response is to make the pain go away, then you cannot heal. Like if you cannot be co-present with pain, you cannot heal. Like Pluto is the god of the underworld or whatever. Like the only way out of hell is to keep on walking, like to get through it. And that's kind of that Pluto process of like if you run away from the pain, then it's like running away from the cocoon. Like the caterpillar is going to die a caterpillar. Like you got to get in the cocoon. It's painful in there. It's unclear, it's uncertain. You got to let go every anchor that's ever held you in your life and allow yourself to become whatever you were born to be, trusting that that is a good thing. And that self-trust of like, yes, that's a good thing. Obviously, that can um, take a minute to practice, I would say, because I think self-trust is a skill that it's not like either you're born with it or not. I think it's something that you can build. Like if you don't trust yourself today, that doesn't mean that you can't practice it and learn how to trust yourself a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. Um, that would be another fun video as far as like how do you actually do that. Um, it's very Plutonian. And again, this was kind of because I was listening to the Atlas of the Heart, all the emotions, um, where Pluto, like in terms of showing us moments where we feel powerless um, and manifesting those during Pluto retrograde, that, oh, that like a lot of times we wake up inside those experiences feeling mad. And what I mean by that is like before we understand that that's where we are, we're mad. Like that's kind of what gets our attention is that we're angry or frustrated. Hopefully you're just frustrated because that means like there's situations that you don't like, but it hasn't gotten to an extreme where you feel like your power is like literally being taken away. Anger is typically the response that happens when we feel powerless in a situation because somebody else is holding our power and we're mad at them for using our power against us. But like we've been saying, like they only are holding it because you gave it to them and you can take it back at any time. So these moments of like getting angry, I think are really interesting to sit with anger. I remember when I very first started working with a life coach in August of 2020, like right after my first session with her, less than a week later, I walked into work and it was just like one thing after another. Like if it had been any one of those things, I would have been totally fine. But the fact that it was like 6 of them in 15 minutes, my head was about to explode. I was just pissed. Like, why isn't anything around here done? Like, do I really have to do it all myself? Like, how often have we all said that? And I was so mad. I was so mad at them for not doing what they were supposed to be doing. And I sent her a voice message, like a Voxer message, and was telling her that like I'm just like shaking. I'm so mad. And she comes back and says something that I will never forget because it just like really struck me. She's like, "Oh, anger? It's super yummy. Super yummy." And she went on to tell me how yummy anger was and how, like, basically it's a road sign that says reclaim more of your power here. And you can pull over and you can reclaim your power and you can carry on with you have more power than you're giving yourself credit for. That's why you're mad. And if you look at anger like that, not, oh, I'm mad at that person because they did something that hurts me or offends me or like, whatever, which is usually why we're mad at them, they're being a way that they shouldn't be. It's like, yeah, but if you would take your power and put it back inside yourself, this happened yesterday. I was not mad. I was definitely let's just say mad. It was definitely a way watered down version of that. But I was feeling annoyed that somebody was telling me what to do. And I, I like was, let's say, rolling around and feeling a little bit like, not drowning. Again, that's a really extreme word, but definitely like feeling a little suffocated, like this person's telling me what to do. And all of a sudden, it just like this clarity came over me that was like, I'm pretty sure I'm like drowning right now in about 2 feet of water. And at any point, I can just stand up and now I'm not drowning anymore. That's to say, like, I can just take my power from them and put it back inside myself. Like, nobody can tell me what to do, like, in any kind of real way. Like, why are you so frustrated? Why are you so annoyed? Like, it's not like they can really tell you that you have to do it this way. Like, but for a while, I mean, for a solid like hour or two, I was just like rolling around in, I don't want to do it this way because this, and I don't like it that way because of this and this. And I was like defending myself to this like person who tells me like, you need to do it like this. And I'm like, I don't have to tell anybody anything. Like, I just get to do what I want to do. And so that person who is like exerting power over me only showed up to show me, to like act as a mirror. Like, I could be claiming just a little bit more. I could be owning the fact that yes, I do get to do whatever I want, especially on my creative stuff. Like, I get to make it however I want. That's the whole point, is that I get to flow whatever energy is in me. So anger is a really interesting tie-in for Pluto. And again, for Pluto retrograde, like, and those power struggle dynamics that can manifest, like, I would watch for anger as the road sign that says, reclaim more of your power here. So retrogrades, like, just as a very basic, it is, so in ancient astrology, they observed the planets, like this was before telescopes, so back when there was only like the traditional planets, and they observed that when the planet went retrograde, it appeared to be moving backwards in the sky compared to its usual forward direction. And so that became known as retrograde. So like a planet will slow down, like from the vantage point of Earth, it looks like the planet is slowing compared to like what it normally does. And then it sits still for just a second. It's stationary retrograde. And then it starts moving backwards. And it takes a second to speed up, just like any physical object. It like goes really slow at the beginning of retrograde and covers those degrees very, very slow. And then it does pick up some speed. And about the middle of retrograde, it starts slowing down again. And then it also comes to a stop and stationary direct. And then it starts moving forward again. So, like, the spiritual implication of this, I guess one quick thing before I move on from there, is it's not actually moving backwards. I was very confused by this when I very first started. It's like, it just appears that way because of, basically because they thought that the earth was the center and the sun is actually the center. So while we're going around the sun and all these other planets are going around the sun, it only looks like they're going backwards because we got so far ahead of the planet, basically. So anyways, it's not actually moving backwards. It doesn't actually change direction, but from our vantage point, it does. And all the words are associated with retrograde, like review, reflect, retrospect, reevaluate, and reallocate. And that last one especially is super poignant with Pluto, because when we manifest these power struggles and we manifest these experiences that show us like where we have unclaimed power out in the world, by the end of the retrograde period, there will be a need, or basically it kind of happens organically as you live through these experiences, but like, you will have reallocated your power back to yourself, meaning I'm holding it now. My boss no longer has it. My partner no longer has it. My 2-year-old no longer, or whoever you needed to reclaim it from. So like that reallocation process of, where am I spending my energy? Am I spending my energy creating what I want to create in this world? Or am I spending my energy arguing with other people who are telling me I can't be what I want to be? Or defending myself to people who say I should do it differently? Because spending my energy like that is very different than pouring my energy into who I think I was born to be. So all of that reallocating the way you spend your energy is kind of a natural byproduct, I guess I would say, of the retrograde period. Hindsight is 2020. So this is a very retrograde concept. When you think about like, okay, so back to the spiritual implications of retrograde. Like, okay, so the planet goes forward, and like in this case with Pluto and Capricorn, like it has gone forward to 28 degrees and some minutes. And it hasn't been at that point since like 1776, 1777. The US is also in its Pluto return right now. So this is kind of relevant where, actually, I'm on this page now. This is relevant where, so Pluto goes all the way up to 28. It's stationary direct. It spends a ton of time there at 28 degrees because it slowed down. It was like slowly picking up speed going backwards. So now it's going to go back. And this is going to be crossing back over the US Pluto return point in the chart for the second time. The first time, I think, was February 20th, 2022, was the first time it was exact, meaning like Pluto in the sky right now is exactly where Pluto was when the US was born or when the Declaration of Independence was signed, which is at 27 degrees, 33 minutes. And so now, because Pluto is going to go retrograde, it's going to go backwards and go back over 2733. It'll be going backwards over that point on July 12th. And then on October 8th, we said, Pluto will station direct, meaning it'll turn back forward, and now it'll recover those degree points. So it'll hit the Pluto return point of the US for a third time on December 28th. So when you think about that process, it's like the first time the planet goes over those degrees, it's kind of just a like, this is who you are. This is what it is. Like, it's a very matter of fact, like manifestation representation of like who you are right now today. And then the planet turns retrograde, and that's where we get retrospective, and we're reviewing who we are in relationship to the outcomes that we're getting. We're reflecting on who have I been? What are my regrets? Like we said, like regret is a very powerful and productive emotion because it drives change. Regret is a function of empathy, I think is how she said that. And basically it's like regret is a mechanism inside of ourselves, inside of our own soul, that says like, you could do better. You didn't do so great that time. And you could do better is inherently implied within regret. It's not just, oh, you suck and you're terrible and you're never going to be good ever. It's like, no, I feel bad because I could have done better. Like, let that rise to the surface during that retrograde period. And then when it turns back around, and now it's going to cover those degrees again, it's going to go forward over those degrees again. You're now a new person. You're not the same person that went over that point February 2022, like the first time that the US Pluto return happened in this example. By December 28th of 2022, like the whole world is different, is basically the idea. And that now the manifestation that you see at that point is a reflection of who you have become as a result of the retrograde work that you did, the reflection, the reviewing, the reallocation of your power. You've made all of those adjustments from April 29th to October 8th, and then Pluto goes through those last few degrees of Capricorn again, and we get to see like, okay, so now how's our relationship with our boss? Now how's our relationship with our partner? Like, all of that can come back together and go forward again as more of a closer reflection to who you are now. So during this retrograde period, some questions to think about. Because we're talking about Pluto and power, when have you abused your power with others to further your agenda for their future? And when has it felt like it's been the opposite of that? So like vice versa. Like, when do you feel like other people have exerted their influence and their power over you, pushing their agenda on you for your future? So anytime you have one individual making choices for another individual, obviously there's extenuating circumstances to that. If the person needs assistance, that's one thing. But like in today's day and age, like I think there's a lot of people who are far too comfortable with exerting power over other people and like making decisions for how other people should be. And so regardless of which side of this you fall on, whether you're kind of using your power in somebody else's life or they're trying to use their power in your life, all of that is a signal and a sign that like, there's power outside of yourself that you could reclaim. So those moments are great for reflection. What is truly within your power to create? And where might you be being overly responsible or underly responsible? And I think on this one, like I definitely err towards overly responsible, where I tend to feel a little bit like I have just the weight of the entire universe sitting on my shoulders. Like if I don't figure it out and do it perfectly, that like the whole entire universe is going to implode. And so sometimes like these reallocations of power are like me give you back your power. I'm going to give you back your power. I'm giving you back your power. You do you. I'm not responsible for any of what you're doing. Like giving people back their own power, like cutting cords with people energetically, where I am no longer taking responsibility for your experience. Like that is also a very real possibility, especially where we're dealing in the sign of Capricorn here, where I would say Capricorn as an archetype tends to just like take responsibility. Like that's just kind of one of those gifts that Capricorn brings to the table is like, if they are in the presence of slack, the slack becomes their responsibility. Like that's just how they roll. So where are you taking on responsibility that truly does belong to somebody else, trying to maybe soften the consequences of their actions for them rather than just letting them face their own music? And again, where are you being underly responsible? Like going back to that example of like everybody in my life takes advantage of me, or they always take and they never give. It's like you're in that example, you're putting yourself in those situations by saying yes. So you're being underly responsible. You're giving them your power. You're believing that they're the ones that get to decide, not me. Like they asked for my help though. Yeah, but you still get to say yes or no. And taking back your power might look like having to say no a good big chunk of times. And that's been something like just with my own Capricorn energy in general, I feel like is part of finding my power and becoming my authentic self is cultivating the practice of knowing who and when and what to say no to. That just because somebody asks for my help, just because somebody's like, oh my gosh, you're so good at this, will you do this for me? Like, I'm glad that you think I'm good at it, and I'm glad that you like that, and I'm glad that you think I could help you, but like I don't have the energy for that right now. And obviously how you say that is always going to depend on the situation and be as diplomatic as you need to be, but we all have the power of how do we want to choose to spend our time. And just because people ask for things from us does not mean that we have to deliver them. So, and again, I was wrestling with this as recently as yesterday morning, where I was drowning in 2 feet of water. And then I just stood up and realized, like, oh, yeah, like just because they're telling me, like, hey, I want this, I want you to do it like this. I mean, whether or not I choose to do that or not is up to me. Like, that is still on me. What is the why of your vision? One, what is your vision? What do you want to create? And I feel like this is another big piece of like kind of taking your own power. A lot of us give away our power simply because we don't have a vision. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what I want to create. I don't have a 5-year plan. I don't know. I don't know. You have an idea? Okay, yeah, I'll just follow you. I'll do what you're doing. Yeah, you just tell me. Tell me what to do and I'll do it. And that's okay. There's nothing like inherently wrong. That behavior I would say is neutral. But if that's where you are, like that is the primed pump for during Pluto retrograde for that boss, or let's say if that's just the example, like I don't really know what I want to do, so I'm just going to work for you so that you can tell me what to do and boss me and tell me like where to be and when to be there, and like great, you'll just make my decisions for me. And then during Pluto retrograde, that person, like maybe their marriage is in trouble or whatever, and like they turn into a total tyrant, they're emotionally abusive, maybe even verbally abusive, like just not okay to work for. And it's like all of a sudden you get to think about it in a new way. Like, do you really want to follow this person? Or do you want to make your own decisions and at least try to put yourself in a better situation? Like, try to take some of the responsibility for how your life is going. And that's scary, obviously. Like, claiming our power is like if we're powerful and if we're in control, what if it doesn't work out? Like, what if I fail? Then I don't have anybody to blame it on. And that's not cool, because then I think I'm going to have to blame it on myself that, like, I failed by my own merit. And that is a reality that, again, like, I think to claim your power fully, you have to be willing to accept that reality where it doesn't work out the way you want. And that's because you created it that way. It's all a big fat giant process. Oh, okay. So back onto the, like, what is the why of your vision? The seed you put in the ground is the plant you get. So this comes back to, let's say that, like, my vision is to save for retirement and make a lot of money so that I can be financially free and secure. And, like, that's my vision. And so what grows from that, like, you planted a money seed, and what grows from a money seed is a money tree. And what a money tree brings you is money. And money actually is not synonymous with freedom or happiness or success or satisfaction or fulfillment. So, like, that's a good example of, like, knowing your why. Like, if you want an upgrade in your career, or you want some outcome because it's going to boost your finances, like, because it's going to make you money, you're planting a money seed, and the only thing you're going to get back is money. And by that point, you will, just like any tree, you'll have wished that 5 years ago you planted a seed for happiness and joy and fulfillment and satisfaction, and, like, actually living a life that feels good to live. Because, like, regardless of what your life is, like, what you wake up on a daily basis and do in your reality, like, a life that feels good to live. I feel like that's a pretty common consensus around, like, an idea of success. Like, I guess, lots of people have lots of different definitions for what makes you successful. But in the realm of Capricorn, where this Pluto retrograde is taking place, I often associate Capricorn with our personal definition of success. Like, how do you know when you're successful? And for me, so much of it is, I wake up in the morning and I'm excited to be alive. Like, that to me is success. Like, when I was making 6 figures working at the software job, I woke up in the morning and I slept in until the last possible second because I did not want to go there. And there would be days when I would use my sick days and call in sick when I wasn't sick, simply because I can't fucking go there today. I just can't do it. I don't want to. I hate it there, but I made a lot of money, but I hated it there. And now when I woke up at 3:45 this morning, and I was excited. I got up, I made coffee, I got my journal, I put on some content, and I did my thing. And I'll probably take a nap this afternoon because that's really early. But it's like, when you're in your joy, like, to me, that's what success is. So I think all of these kind of tie back to, like, what is your why? What's the point of what you're even doing? Like, I was re-listening to Hannah Gadsby's TED Talk this morning, and she repeats in there several times, what is the purpose of my human? What is the purpose of my human? Why are you here? Like, if you're here, obviously source had a reason. Like, you yourself, God, had a reason for wanting you to exist. Of your human, what seeds are you planting in the ground? Because as they come up, like, you really can't be surprised if you got a money tree if all you planted was a money seed. Like, if you didn't plant a happiness seed, chances are you're not going to get a happiness tree. Pluto going retrograde is also said to bring corruption to the surface. And basically, in my book, corruption would be anything where we're acting out of a shadow frequency rather than a light frequency. And this can, because we're talking about Pluto and it's a generational planet, it's an outer planet, moves extremely slowly. It is mostly playing out at the collective level, which if you look at Pluto entering Capricorn in general and this US Pluto return that is going on all this year, I mean, we started Pluto in Capricorn in 2008 with the financial crisis and the global recession that caused. And since then, we have had so much corruption bubbling to the surface. Like, think Cosby and Epstein and Weinstein and all of these powerful people who previously, like, it's not like they just turned bad when Pluto entered Capricorn. It was like the corruption and the shadow, the darkness that was already there simply came to the surface. So again, it's hard to be mad at the things that manifest during Pluto retrograde, because it's not like let's say you find out that your spouse is having an affair or something like that. Like, it's not necessarily like, oh, that just happened because Pluto went retrograde. No, it's like you just found out about it because Pluto went retrograde. Hopefully that doesn't happen to anybody here. But if it does, I trust that that's exactly what needed to happen. You know, like these things that go on under the surface that so often, like I said, when humans encounter pain, the urge is like, make the pain go away, make the pain stop. This is uncomfortable, make it stop. And Pluto turning retrograde, it brings it to the surface where it's much more difficult to get away from. So others overpowering you is an invitation to claim more of your personal power than you are right now. And this was a fun thought. And I don't know exactly what to make of it, but maybe you guys do. So this thought of overpowering and how it relates to Capricorn in general, but also Pluto in terms of power dynamics and influence of one person over another person. And this concept of herding and like actual, like back in the day, cowboys and like going on a cattle drive kind of thing. I watched a lot of Western movies when I was a kid, not necessarily by choice. But that's like one example where, like, okay, so Capricorn is this visionary energy where you have this picture in your mind of like the Mount Everest, the top of Mount Everest is like where you're trying to get to. And these different steps along the way are how you're going to like actually get yourself up the side of the mountain and be at this envisioned place. And so like on a cattle drive, it's a lot the same. Like the cowboys, they all know that we're going to Kansas City or wherever we're driving these cattle or whatever it is. And the cows don't know. The cows don't know where they're going, but and cattle drive's not like a perfect example because mostly they're going there to be slaughtered. But like in this case, it's like there are times where herding and using herding, herding, using your influence to like drive a group is a good thing. I think maybe business is a better example where like when I opened the grocery store, it was me with like the vision of here's what we're trying to build. Here's like the finished product of what we want the grocery store to be. And there were like 20 people on the team as far as contractors and employees and all of the different people who were doing all the different parts. And like not any of them had the overall vision. They all just had their little piece of which part of the vision they're wanting to, or they're working on right now. So it's not necessarily a bad thing to like exert influence over someone, but like this is for me personally, it's like how can that become like how can we bring that process of influence though still above the surface, and like it doesn't have to be something where like you're manipulating and pulling their strings from like this covert place to like get them to do what you want them to do, like more letting people opt in to like, hey, I have this vision, I'm building this grocery store. I'm not going to tell you like step by step by step exactly where we're going, but do you want to help me build it? Okay, great. Now you've opted in. Now here I'm going to assign you your to-do list of projects. So like in the real world of like accomplishing a vision, there are times and places for exerting power over other people. But I think there's a line in there somewhere of personal autonomy and consent and like letting people hold their own power and not just assuming that people are going to get on board with your vision because that's what you want to do. So like I said, I don't really know where all of that lands, but the other example that I had of that was like comedians. So like, again, I was rewatching some Hannah Gadsby stuff, and they do the same thing. They like push you in a certain direction so that when they drop the punchline, it's funny. And so it's like the same thing. Like you can exert power over people and like use your influence for good or not. And so again, I think it's like not necessarily thinking that we're going to be totally like not ever influencing anybody ever, because I think there's also a part of us that like we are influenced by every single thing that we ever see, but doing it in an ethical way, I think, is like where I'm at with this Pluto retrograde. Is like, I want to own my power. I want to give everybody else their power. And if you want me to influence you because you like what I'm talking about, then opt in and come over here and let's hang out and let's like bask in this energy that we're basking in. But like, I'm not forcing you to stay. I'm not forcing anybody to believe what I believe. I don't go to family Easter and be like, hey, so source energy, like you're basically God, like, you know, blah, blah. Like, I try not to put my beliefs on other people, except for when they show up and they want to hear what they are, you know, like that's still entirely possible. And I think Pluto retrograde is like, as much as anything, like balancing that, like how much are we allowing people to have influence over us? Because, you know, and it's even a job now to like be an influencer, but like that wouldn't be a job if people weren't so hungry to be influenced. And I think often we're not owning that as an active process. Like we believe maybe that we receive conditioning, like, how do I want to say that? I kind of just lost that train of thought. Probably means I need a sip of coffee. Ice cold coffee, nothing better. So that's Pluto retrograde, which apparently wanted to go first. The solar eclipse new moon in Taurus, let's look at that for a second. So this is the second eclipse of the Taurus Scorpio cycle. On the prep playlist for this week, I put a video that I did back in November that talks about the first eclipse on this, which was the full moon lunar eclipse in Taurus in November, of 2021. So that's on there if you want to check that out. So this part I got out of Molly McCord's video, which is also on the playlist, where she looked back to Uranus is in Taurus right now, and this new moon solar eclipse is happening at 10 degrees Taurus, and Uranus has been back and forth over 10 degrees Taurus several times lately, thanks to its retrograde pattern. So it was there July 2020 for the first time, and then went back over that point April and May of 2021. So that would have been the retrograde motion. And then came back over 10 degrees of Uranus in January of 2022. So over like a year and a half, Uranus has been working the ground in this 10 degree Taurus neighborhood, just like she says, like tearing up the ground. Like Uranus and Taurus is like literally shaking the physical foundations under our feet. It can be very uncomfortable. But basically, in this area of our life, Uranus has broken us free of things from our past in this area. It has like kind of cultivated this rich soil that's like worked up and ready for this new moon solar eclipse intentions to be planted. So these seeds that we're planting at this time are like even more powerful than new moon intentions typically are. To make it even more powerful, at the time of the new moon solar eclipse in Taurus, the ruler of Taurus is Venus, and Venus is in Pisces. Pisces is the sign of Venus's exaltation. Exaltation means like this, the planet is lifted on high. Thank you so much for your super chat. That's so generous. Exaltation is where the planet is lifted on high. So like if Venus can't be in Taurus or Libra, the two signs that it rules, then it is happiest to be in Pisces. And it just was conjunct to Neptune. And on the day of the new moon solar eclipse, it will be conjunct Jupiter. Jupiter and Neptune are the ancient and modern rulers of Pisces. So you have the two rulers and the exalted planet, all three in Pisces on this new moon solar eclipse. So all of that to say, basically Venus has been deeply reprogrammed these last 5 months since about November of 2021, when Venus entered Capricorn and then went retrograde and made a few conjunctions with Pluto, all in Capricorn for like 3 months, Venus was, and then met up with Mars and they traveled together for like 6 weeks. So Venus has had all of this go on in the last 5 months. And Venus represents our values, our sense of like what's important to us, like what is precious to you. So your unique sign and house and aspects on your Venus placement in your natal chart can kind of help you edge towards that feeling of what's precious to you. But chances are that the answer to that question is a lot clearer than it was like back in October of 2021 before all of this with Venus happened. And so to have the ruler of Taurus in its sign of exaltation, conjunct Jupiter, all of that is tying in this like radical, high frequency, ethereal, divine feminine energy. Like source energy itself feels like it is part of this imprint of like, what are these new seeds that are being planted as far as this solar eclipse goes? And so when we look at the highest frequencies of the divine feminine, which Taurus, Pisces, and Capricorn are all three feminine signs, the highest frequency of divine feminine is unconditional love of self, which, like we talked about, ends up spilling out onto everyone else that you ever encounter, but does begin with yourself. Divine security and embodying your self-worth. So those three concepts, I think, tie in Pisces, Taurus, and Capricorn, and that embodying that highest frequency of feminine energy, like you walk through the world differently. You have a different pace about you, like you're less in a hurry. And if you think about that, like if you slow down, like the timing of your entire life changes. And if the timing of your entire life changes, like think about what that means as far as like, you know, somebody cut me off on the freeway, or like the guy in line behind me at the grocery store was so rude, or like all these things are just a matter of timing. It's just a matter of like you cross paths with that. And so slowing down into embodying my power, embodying the fact that I am safe and secure inside my skin, embodying the fact that I'm literally God itself. So of course God loves me. Like that's just, you're just full of that. There's no longer a rush to get there, to be there, to prove it, to make it happen, to like, so when you take the rush away, timing of your whole entire world changes. Like you get there later, so now there is no traffic, nobody to cut you off. You get there a little bit later, so now it's a completely different cashier. There is nobody in line behind you, or there's a nice guy in line behind you, because it's just a different time. So all of these different like adjustments that we make internally, they do permanently, I think, especially since we have in the mix at this time, making a sextile to all of this energy in Pisces at the end of Pisces, that these are permanent shifts happening inside our frequency. And that when we change our frequency, that like our literal movements through the world shift, and that we're now on a whole new path and manifesting a whole new reality. So it's, again, feminine energy, I historically have probably a more dominant masculine side than I do feminine side, where I am more used to kind of taking charge and going after what I want, setting a goal, doing the steps to meet the goal, like, you know, all of that kind of stuff, like taking charge and stepping up and saying, this is what I want and this is what I'll have. And with feminine, there is such a, like, if you build it, they will come kind of receptivity of like trust and cultivating your energy such that you find yourself in the right place, right time to receive whatever is in your highest good. So where the masculine is identifying, I want this thing and I will go out and I will get my thing. The feminine is opening and saying, whatever is in my highest good, I will take that in the timing that it serves my highest good. And I usually cap that off with like my highest good and the highest good of the all. Like, I like to think about it like that in that collective landscape. But um, this is definitely bringing new beginnings. And because we have all of this energy in the earth signs, these beginnings feel incredibly stable to me. That, like, really Pluto in Capricorn is trying to do that intentional deep dive into hell to root out the sources of the discomfort and the unhappiness. Like, think, you know, something like racism, for example. When you're talking about healing racism, racism is a system, not an action. I watched this lecture by, gosh dang it, I think her last name is D'Angelo. Can't come up with her first name, but she wrote the book White Fragility, and basically like why it's so hard to talk to white people about racism is what this book is about. It's like helping white people to assess the ingrainedness of this situation. But like, that's one example where like one individual can't make that change. Like, this Pluto in Capricorn is bringing to light like all of the ways that our systems like don't truly serve the highest good of the all. And it's through that maybe painful operation of looking at things that are uncomfortable and looking at what doesn't work so that that can burn to the ground, be released, and something that is sustainable can be built in its place. So all of this, like, another podcast I was listening to this morning, she was talking about how like people who at the beginning of the pandemic, especially, I don't hear this nearly as much anymore, but like, especially at the beginning, people who were like, I just want to go back to normal. I just want it to go back to normal. I just want to go back to the way life was. And she made a good point that like, I feel like fits right here perfectly with like Pluto retrograde and these new beginnings that are coming with this eclipse, is like, we don't want to go back to normal. Normal included a lot of corruption. Normal, like pre-pandemic, included the biggest wealth gap that's existed since right before the Great Depression. So like, going back to normal doesn't really sound like a very good option to me, just because normal had its flaws. And so same thing, like, how do you get out of hell? You just keep going. So this is a process of bringing all of those things to the surface so that we can see them more clearly. And hopefully what gets released is the part that was toxic and not serving the highest good anyway. And by releasing that, we only create more room to build something that truly will support and sustain our future on this planet. So I skipped this page at the beginning, but I do want to come back to it and talk about this one point about the Earth family, and the Earth family being Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn, and how one of the Earth family's greatest skills is in pruning. And this has been on my mind for a couple weeks because Dolly pruned my tree in the front yard. And it made me a little bit sad because it used to be a bush and now it's definitely a tree. And Maddie has some pictures that I think we're going to post in the blog post for this. So if you want to, that's a nice time to plug. Like, if you aren't already signed up for my weekly newsletter that goes out every Monday with kind of like a highlight synopsis of what I cover in the Friday live streams, and then also provides a link back to the blog post where, again, it has like more in-depth stuff. So these pictures that I'm talking about will be part of that blog post. And maybe Maddie can put the link to join the the newsletter in the chat. And so anyway, so this tree, it made me kind of sad that it had all these shoots like coming off the bottom, the base of the tree, and she took her handsaw and like cut off every single shoot that was not like the main tree. And that the point of why you would do that, it really got me thinking about friendships, especially this idea of pruning and how this idea of pruning serves us when we're talking about earth energy and manifesting in the earth realm. When we think about like energy in the earth realm, it's finite. It's like you have the energy you have. So like when you wake up in the morning, you have and today's energy to do whatever you can with it. And when today's energy is gone, then maybe you can do a little bit more. Too much of that and you're going to burn yourself right out. But like there's a finite amount of energy inside of each day. And now let's say that you're giving half or more of that energy away to things that are little side issues. They don't really matter in the grand scheme of your life. And like, okay, that's not a big deal because it's only 10 minutes or yeah. And then I talked to this friend and, you know, we're not best friends and mostly they just needed to vent and I just had to listen, but like it was only 20 minutes. And like you start doing that and giving away all your time and all of a sudden, like you're moving towards what really matters half as fast. You're giving away all of this energy to things that don't really serve like the overall purpose. And so this idea with this tree is like, you know, about a year and a half ago, I pruned my friendships back quite a bit and had to look at it in these terms of like the cost benefit analysis of this friendship, basically. And what energy am I putting into the friendship? And what is the purpose of the friendship in my life? And how does it help me? How does it hold me back? Is it lifting me up? Is it weighing me down? Like what is my relationship to this friendship? And I found that at that time, I had some really big like offshoots of like my energy is like going all the way over here and my energy is coming out this way. And like meanwhile, my little tree in the middle, like me and my purpose, my mission on this planet to be who I was born to be was like barely moving forward because I am sending out all kinds of energy to all of these friends. And it was during eclipse season last year where like all of a sudden I looked around and it was like not necessarily that I don't want these friends anymore, but I realized like, wow, I've been sending so much of my energy out. I need to call my energy back in and I need to like point it back at myself because I'm feeling like I want to, you know, have a podcast. I want to make YouTube videos. I want to share a message. I want to do this. And I'm not like at that point, I wasn't. I was talking to this friend all morning and then I talked to this friend all evening. And then I was putting all of my energy into these friendships. And at the end of it, I had nothing left to put into my core mission. And so it was essential to prune those friendships. And you could do this in a number of ways. Like you could obviously reestablish the friendship and like redeclare boundaries and resituate it into however much energy you do want to put into the friendship if you're wanting to keep it. Or it could be something where by the time you're evaluating, like it's too far gone. Like we need to just like demo and rebuild maybe with a different friend or something like that, you know, we've had our time together and now it's time for us to go our separate ways. So all of these are things that, you know, there are lots of different ways that we can have these little offshoots coming off of our main energy, taking away energy from what's really important. Like when we talk about manifesting anything in the physical, like whether you want your dream job or you want, you know, a partner or anything in the physical world that you're wanting, how quickly you're moving towards that thing is a factor of how much energy you're putting towards it. So if you're letting energy leak out of you towards things where it's like, yeah, but it was my friend and they had a bad day and they needed to vent and like they needed me to listen. And so I was there for them. And like, you know, now now I have a headache and I think I just need to go lay down and recover for an hour after listening to their bad day. But like, it's like those kinds of situations where we are in the driver's seat. We get to choose, do you want to invest your energy in that way? Is it paying off for you? And this is maybe like more of a masculine perspective, even, to say, like, to put yourself in the center of your world and to say, like, if this isn't benefiting you, then you get to cut ties with it, that you get to take your handsaw and just chop that branch right off, and it's your life, and whatever branches you want to chop off, whatever branches you want to keep growing, like, it's your energy to spend it however you want. But to take this opportunity these next 6 months, and as often as we possibly can, put ourselves in the driver's seat. And sometimes, kind of like going back to the concept of like cultivating our ability to say no, sometimes that means being the one who chooses, I'm going to prune this branch. I'm not going to engage with this anymore, because when I put my energy here, my return on investment, it just doesn't make sense to spend my energy in this way. So I'm going to hang on to that energy. And like, after I prune those friendships, I mean, I'm not trying to advocate for like burn down all your friendships, but I severed 2 very substantial friendships. And in the months that followed, I like started my podcast and started my YouTube channel. And like, I felt like my mission for why I was born got off the ground when I stopped giving away all my energy to all of these other people and focus it towards what is it that I truly want to create in this world. Let me see if I have anything else here for another, like, kind of concrete example is, so like my money and saving my money at this point. Um, like, anytime I want to spend my money, and how we spend our time and our energy is a lot the same as how we spend the dollars in our bank account, considering like it's finite for this moment in time, right? And I get to choose what I want to spend it on, what's worth spending it on. And so like, I really, really, really want to buy a school bus and remodel it into basically an RV and go live around wherever you can drive the bus. I got a passport, so if I can drive the bus there, I want to go there. And now, because I have that dream, because I have that vision, that's like my main tree up in the center. This is my kind of like next chapter, what I want to be doing. And so anytime I look at something in my life and I want to buy it, I want to spend this money, I am comparing it back to, okay, yes, that's only $10. Maybe that's not that big a deal, or even $2. But that's $2 then that I won't have to move forward on my bus. So it's like, if you're spending half of your money over here, you're moving towards this dream half as fast. And again, it's not right or wrong, or like how, like finding somebody to tell you what to do and like, where should I spend my money? Where should I spend my time? It's like, it's such a personal decision for each of us individually. Like, how do you want to show up in the world? Like, what's truly important to you? Kind of going back to that Venus and Taurus, even, like, what's worth possessing? Like, what's worth spending your precious money on? What do you hold dear to yourself? And like, for example, like my Venus is in Gemini in the second house. And like, when it comes to what I am willing to spend my money on, knowledge and experiences and um, food. Obviously, I'm a Taurus rising. Like, I get down on some good food pretty regularly, but it's like that. It's like, what's worth it compared to just mindlessly like, oh, I saw this thing and it's really cute, and so I bought it. But like, now I just brought it home and it's like one more piece of stuff that I have in my house that I really didn't need, especially compared to like when I have a dream like bus life, and I want to put as much energy towards this dream as I possibly can. So putting ourselves in the driver's seat of how we spend our time, how we spend our attention, how we spend our money, how we spend our energy in this world, because especially the Pluto retrograde part and the May 16th full moon lunar eclipse are both bringing huge manifestations of basically how you've been doing that so far. So if, like, how to say that? Well, I was going to say, like, there are rewards and consequences, but really rewards are a subset of consequences. So like, I feel like in retrogrades, we experience the consequence, kind of like karma is consequences, but it's neutral. It doesn't mean good or bad. But I think during retrogrades, we get to experience the consequences of our current energetic dynamic with whatever that planet is. So in this case, Pluto, it's our personal power. And we're going to experience the consequences of like how we have been standing in our personal power as of late, like the average of where we are right now. So that pretty much brings me, I jumped around in my notes a lot, Maddie, sorry about that. She writes it up for me and puts it on the blog so it looks all nice and neat. This will be a fun one to get to unravel. But in my closing ideas, I just keep seeing this like triangle between Pisces kind of in the center. We have all of this action in Pisces right now, and then it's sextiling down to Taurus, and it's sextiling over to Capricorn, and those two making this trine. There's this triangle here between Pisces, Taurus, Capricorn. And that basically like this Pisces is taking like all of this divine love, this divine energy, like just top notch frequency energy, and sending it into these two houses. So like, where is your Taurus house? Where's your Capricorn house? Because these two houses are kind of like the beneficiary of whatever's going on in your Pisces energy right now. So connecting with that divine and then grounding it into the physical, both as like our primary focus. I say primary because of the eclipses and because the North Node is in Taurus until July of 2023. So like our primary focus is first to embody our own divinity. So which is to kind of say like, claim your power, stand in your power, be your authentic self, stand in your truth, speak your truth, all of that, embody your own divinity. And then secondary, how can you reallocate your energy within your life to vote for structures that embody the divinity that you're embodying? So that's to say like in the one of the heart to heart episodes, I talked about how, you know, I used to work at a software company, and basically as I worked there for 5.5 years. And as I woke up in my spirituality during that time while I was employed there, it became basically impossible to keep working there, because as I clarified my own values and found like what was important to me, it was very clear that the company and I were on very different pages. And so at that point, like, it's their company, it's your party, it's your pool, compete in it if you want to, but I don't have to swim in it. So I left. And it was very much like a clarification of my own values that led to me deciding to step away from working at this place. And that, I mean, obviously that's a huge structure, like the place where we work. So as we clarify and embody our own divinity, it will become increasingly clear where we are maybe still participating with structures and groups and organizations and physical things in general that do not support who you have now become. Like in your own divinity, this is no longer acceptable. I'm no longer willing to spend my money with that company because I know they use child labor and are paying them slave wages. Like, I don't buy clothes from that company anymore. That's one example of, as you find your own alignment, you have to look out into the world and be like, where am I investing my energy? Because when I buy clothes from that company, for example, I'm voting for their success with my dollars. And meanwhile, they're perpetuating child slavery halfway around the planet. And I'm benefiting by buying this cheap shirt. So there's all kinds of ways that, like, we as individuals, like, we don't single-handedly change the collective, but the collective cannot change if the individuals within it do not change. And this feels like just the next wave of people waking up to their own individual divinity. Yeah, that's pretty much all I got for this day. I am going to go back through the chat and hang out for a little while and respond to some things, because you guys have been sending all kinds of fun things, it looks like. But I did want to invite you one more time to check out the Patreon. Patreon. We're having our Sacred Circle group event this coming Tuesday, April 26th at 10 a.m. Central Time. Sign up for the newsletter if you want that in your inbox every Monday with notes and new things and keeping you all up to date on what's going on in the Owning Authenticity universe. But yeah, thank you so much for joining me here for these. I will be releasing also another episode of Astrology Energy where I released the first one this past Monday, so I'll do another one for this coming Monday where we look ahead at the next 7 days and like what is the energy of these 7 days and kind of some broad strokes. So not like this where we go archetype by archetype, but 20 minutes worth of like kind of what can you expect for the week as a whole. Maybe some contemplation questions and some fun things like that. Yeah, so take a big deep breath. Oh, it's like perfect drinking temperature. Okay, so I'm gonna go all the way back to the beginning. Ooh. So Shay says 10 degrees Taurus is in my 5th house. That's exciting for creative types like me. Yes, I'll bet. The 5th house is play and creativity and joy and self-expression and shining bright in like your own individuality and all kinds of fun things. And actually, I want to recommend kind of uh, as an extension of like this whole, where are these pieces in your chart? Like where is 28 Capricorn? Where is 10 Taurus? Maddie, if you can grab on the Astrology Podcast YouTube channel, there are 2 videos. One is the first 6 houses, and the second video is the second 6 houses. And they do about 20 minutes per house on that video. Excuse me. And just very helpful as far as identifying life areas that are ruled by each house. Like Shay, I'm not sure if you have kids, but I'm pretty sure at least your first kid is ruled by the 5th house. And then I think like the second kid is ruled by the 7th, third is the 9th, fourth is the 11th. I think something like that. Like there's all kinds of different significations of each house. So that could be a fun way to kind of find those houses in your chart and then maybe watch that section. There's timestamps in the description of those videos. But yeah, he does, and Chris Brennan, who runs the Astrology Podcast, and then a couple other astrologers on that video. Yeah, super fun. Oh my gosh. Okay, so the upward spiral says, who spent their week checking if their butthole was clenched? Yeah, I did. Have you noticed, like, is it getting more relaxed? Like, for those of you who are like, what the fuck are you talking about? This was a big thing in last week's live stream. And okay, so I checked it one time last night or the night before when I was like going to sleep. I was like laying down in my bed and it was like totally relaxed. And that was probably the only time that it was like completely relaxed. There was no more relaxed to put in there. And so, yeah, it was, that's one way, I guess, what was the summary of that? It's like one way to tell if you're in your body. Like when you leave your body clenches for like defense and to protect itself. And so like if your butthole is clenched, if that base of your being is clenched, that basically like you're not fully embodied, like your energy is not down in your body. Chances are like you're in your mind or possibly like out of your mind. I wouldn't put it past me to be out of my mind. But yeah, that was I continue to check back to see because it seems to be relaxing. And like as I check it like more days in a row, it's like I find it in a more calm state than it originally was. Like before I was paying attention to it, the first few times, like it was like I was clearly not in my body like at all. And yeah, that's one of those things that like I still, every time I talk about it, I'm like, how could I not be in my body? Oh wait, yes, no, I know what they mean. It's just such a weird way to say it. Oh, Jody, thank you for being honest. Okay. Like I think, yeah, I was almost going to ask that. So I'm glad the upward spiral did. Yes. so weird for anybody who missed last week. I have Black Moon Lilith in Scorpio. If anybody has a good resource on Black Moon Lilith that you could share, like a good video or a good book or like something to learn about it, because it is one of those things that like I don't ever cover it or touch on it because it still continues to elude me. I have Black Moon Lilith in Virgo, somewhat conjunct my South Node. So like it's also then opposite my Mars. And I've not ever really figured out what Black Moon Lilith, like what it means. Natal Chiron in Taurus, 12th house, Uranus, Scorpio, 6th house, Leo, Sun, 3rd, Aquamoon, 9th. Oh shit, I need to talk. Yeah. Yeah. That's like basically, so whether you have like an actual grand fixed cross, meaning like the planets are all within range for like the two sets of oppositions and the four squares to exist, or you just have planets in all four fixed signs, like any period of change. I would imagine Uranus and Taurus has just been a nightmare since about 2018, but that's just a guess. Yeah, there's like a volume knob that's getting turned up on going with the flow of our being, and the grand fixed cross, while it's brilliant at providing staying power once it starts, it's not awesome at switching gears or switching paths, like bringing this one to an end and starting something new. Like it's just not the best energy for that. So I definitely feel for you. The crooked trail set up pretty well there with your grand fixed cross. But I would also imagine that like there's a beauty to fixed energy that I don't contemplate it quite as often as I do my mutable energy, but like the fixed energy, to know yourself, to like once you do find who you are and like you've now figured that out, like, and now the staying power of your grand fixed cross is applied to your soul's mission. That is a gift. That's a gift. The preview, the precursor, the plot that it has to unfold first, though, is that first you apply your grand fixed cross to the conditioning, like what you were taught you needed to be, what you needed to say, what you needed to do. And you're putting your staying power into trying to live up to all of that instead of putting it behind your soul's mission. So like once you can get it over here, you're home free. Like it's, yeah, you're good to go. But I definitely get it. Change is not the most fun thing for fixed energy. So Shay says, I watched a YouTube video today about how to build routines, and as much as I love routine, I realized I don't actually have enough routine in my life. I think I'm being prepared for the eclipse. Routine is an interesting one because I think there's like a different sweet spot with routine versus flexibility for everybody. Like for some people, routine is like oxygen, and without it, they are suffocating. And for other people, routine is like a pillow on the face and they feel like they're suffocating. So yeah, I think you got to like find what works for you. As far as like, what is the routine that makes your life easier, funner, better? Like everybody's going to have a different sweet spot with that. Like for me, the main routine that I employ in my life is my morning time, where every single morning, no matter what time I have to leave the house, I wake up at least 2 or 3 hours early so that I can have like my morning ritual with myself, where I journal and listen to content and drink my water and stretch and do all that stuff in the morning before I ever engage with anybody else, is my self-care. And other than that, I really, really, really like it when it's like 24/7, go with the flow. And that's kind of the level I prefer, except I guess all that to say that at the end of last year, I had been free 24/7 since August, where I was no longer working. So I was totally just going with the flow. And it became very disorienting. It was like very almost hard to function. Like days were blurring into each other. And like I never knew what day it was, which you really don't need to, especially if you don't have anywhere to be. But it just was like like time was passing and there was no real way to mark that time was passing. And so that was kind of what led me to then January 2nd, deciding that I wanted to do these weekly live streams every Friday. And so, like, now I have my morning routine, and every Friday that I show up and I do this. But otherwise, like, yeah, routine and we just don't really like need each other a whole lot. But at the same time, if something's important, like my self care, that's my routine, like every single morning, because it's not negotiable. It will happen. And it has such a better shot of happening if I do it first. Like anytime I've tried to add meditation to my routine, for example, and I try to add it at the end of the day or in the afternoon, like it just fizzles out where the momentum of the day takes me in whatever direction, versus when I've added it to my morning time or like I do it first thing, it seems to at least hang around more than it does when I try to put it in the afternoon. But yeah, everybody kind of got to figure out what works for them. And then like within your, like I think about Dolly, and like especially now that we live together, like she is a highly routined being, and she doesn't like to have like crazy huge amounts of free time. Like she really does like to have a job that she goes to for 40 hours a week, that takes up a big chunk of her day, most days out of the week. And like it's almost like on her days off, she's fidgety, she doesn't really know what to do with herself. So like I'm the exact opposite of that. Like working 40 hours a week makes me feel like I am just a shell of myself. So it just like even within one household, like everybody is going to have their own sweet spot. And actually that reminds me of another video I watched this morning. Like I said, I got up at 3:45, but this was the first one, and it was called like something like Parents Who Raise Their Kids with No Rules, I think. And it was like these few UK families, and one of the families had like 7 kids, and none of the kids had ever been to school. The oldest ones were, I think, 12 and 13, and none of the kids had ever been sent to school, and they hadn't been raised with rules. And the 12-year-old, the second to the oldest one, he wanted to go to school. He wanted routine, he wanted structure, he wanted to do the schoolwork. He felt proud of himself after he did his schoolwork. Like he wanted to go. And he was uncomfortable in the wide open space that the parents had set for him, while basically the other 6 kids were like living it up bit of it. He, on the other hand, was like, this is too much freedom. I need more structure. So like everybody's gonna find their own sweet spot. But yeah, that's very interesting that you would watch it today, because yeah, I feel like, especially with all the Pisces energy that we have going on right now, um, that's a very like floaty, liquidy, fluidy energy, and it's inherently ungrounded. And so that's like, again, what I see my morning ritual time as, is like that's a way to ground into my day, a ground into like this is a new day with a new set of energy, new set of possibilities. That there's just something very grounding about knowing that when I wake up in the morning, this is what I do, even though I give myself 90% freedom after that. And on and on. Yes. All the things. Oh, wow. So the Crooked Trail is also the one who was sharing about all their fixed placements. And now, so they also have Pisces midheaven, Gemini rising, which means like your main cross on your chart, your ACDC and MCIC are in the mutable sign. So technically you have a mutable cross as well as fixed cross. Um, there's actually, or no, she had a cardinal cross and a fixed cross. I was going to say Betty White. You should check out her energy, because like she has a ton of like what I would say is hard energy, like tons of squares and oppositions, and so many things in her chart that you would think are going to create friction and basically make the native like lose their shit. And in her, it all came together to like create this extremely prolific life. So I think it's like just a really good example of, just because you have, especially the fixed grand cross, doesn't necessarily mean that it's got to be a bumpy ride. Like I think there's ways, especially with as much mutable energy as you have, Crooked Trail, for figuring out how to embrace change sometimes and how to use your staying power at other times. Like basically, you have access to both. Yeah. So Irene is also having the eclipses in her first and seventh house. Um, and has natal Uranus at 10 degrees Scorpio. So the eclipse will be exactly opposite natal Uranus. And so, yeah, that one especially, like, because Uranus is in Taurus, which means what? Like, you're just coming through your Uranus opposition, right? Because like Uranus is at 14 degrees Taurus right now, I believe. And if yours is at 10. So like last year, the last couple years, you've been going through your Uranus opposition. So I would imagine that kind of like, you know, Molly McCord said, like this 10 degrees Uranus Taurus is like tearing up the ground here. And same for like, it's been going back and forth over this opposition point with your natal Uranus at 10 degrees Scorpio. So like, I would wonder, like, have you had a lot of loss and like endings and closings and like realizing that like directions that you had started to go like the first 40 some years, like, okay, yeah, no, I want to go a different direction this time. Like typically our Uranus opposition, which happens like around age 42, since Uranus has an 84-year orbit, um, it's kind of like the beginning of the midlife crisis, depending on the person, depending on like what you've been doing with your life so far. Um, but yeah, that is a very like awakening time for a good big chunk of people, like awakening more to their own individuality and like trying to get on the path of like, who am I? Who was I born to be? And so I would imagine that like this, the moon and sun coming together like exactly opposite, it's like literally like putting a gigantic seed like down into that exact place where you've been cultivating the ground these last couple years. Um, yeah, good times. Mm, interesting. 13 degrees. Hmm. So, Jody says, love all your videos and also love hearing Maddie's perspective too. So, one of my favorite manifestations, I think, out of all my videos happened this week. And I don't know that I even told this version of the story to Maddie, but she's going to hear it now. So, on the second episode of Heart to Heart was when Maddie shared about the book Breaking Loose of the Money Game. And that conversation was something that like we had been talking like through WhatsApp or whatever. And she had read the book and had told me little snippets and was like, I really want to tell you like all about this book. I feel like there's something in it for you. And of course there was huge things in it for me. And we both were very comfortable with the inspiration, like, let's record this conversation then and use it as an episode of Heart to Heart and share it with others. And so glad that we did that because Maddie is who edits those episodes. And so as she watches back through that video, she says, hopefully it's okay that I share this. She's like, seeing myself that excited and like enthusiastic to share what I was so passionate about sharing and like to see myself lit up like that as I was telling my story. That was like somewhat eye-opening for her, that like she hadn't really seen herself to that extent, like sharing her own passion. And it just, in that moment of listening to her talk about that, like it gave me this whole opening about like what that Heart to Heart series could really be, because I think there are countless other people on this planet, like 8 billion of them, that have a cool perspective, like basically everybody. And so I really, really, really am excited about, as I wind down my grocery training project, and putting more energy back into my YouTube channel, really excited about having more heart to heart conversations with more people. and posting those conversations as much as we're comfortable with onto the channel for everybody, because I do think that there is such value in hearing different people's perspectives. And obviously, if I'm talking all the time, then I don't get to hear other people's perspectives. And I like that just as much as the next guy. So for reals, if you are interested or open to possibly being one of the people that I have a conversation with for one of those episodes, please email me. So Taurus sun, Lorraine says Taurus sun in the 7th house, Taurus moon in the 6th house. So you were born right before a Taurus new moon. That's interesting. And a Scorpio rising. So yeah, like in that situation, how to say that? So in the house system that I use, which is Placidus, it allows for what she's talking about, where you have Taurus in 2 different houses, basically. So you the 7th house, and you have part of your Taurus in the 6th house. Know from that, depending on where exactly the descendant is, like is 10 degrees Taurus in the 6th or in the 7th. But I would say that it's going to light up both of them. Like, even though 10 degrees Taurus is in one of those houses, it's not in both, I think it's still likely that the entire range of Taurus in your chart is likely to be illuminated by this new moon solar eclipse. So that means like implications in your 6th house and in your 7th house. And then same for like the full moon lunar eclipse that's going to happen May 16th, where like in her case, that would be the 1st and the 12th, same thing. Like I think it's going to light up all of Scorpio, and that would affect 2 houses for this person where they have it in both. If you use whole sign houses, this isn't possible. Like you're always going to have one sign in one house. So it's only ever going to affect one house. But I think if you resonate with Placidus and you have this where Taurus is over the line and it's falling in 2 houses, I do think it'll affect both. I think it will affect one more than the other, being the one whose front cusp starts in Taurus. So like in this case where Taurus starts in the 6th house, and then the 7th house cusp or the descendant is in Taurus, meaning that the 7th house is ruled by Taurus for this person's chart, where they also have Taurus in the 6th, but most of the time, if you have that situation, then you're going to have Aries on the 6th house cusp, if that makes sense. So like Aries would rule the 6th house, even though there is some Taurus energy present. So I think in that case, it would way affect your 7th house because that's ruled by Taurus, with minor implications to the house before that isn't ruled by Taurus. Hopefully that makes sense. Oh, perfect. That was so sad last week when the microphone wouldn't cooperate, but you know, always the way it's meant to be. Yes. Jody says, we humans complicate stuff, and then we need compassion for doing that. So one of my gene keys, like if you look at your gene keys chart, he uses different placements from your human design chart to populate your gene keys chart. Anyways, my pearl, which is like the end of the gene keys, after you go through the whole thing, you end up at the pearl. And I think it's number 19. I forget the number. It's either 19 or 23. Doesn't matter. But the shadow is complexity. The shadow is complexity, and the gift is simplicity. And the pearl is like our essence. Like what essence did we come forward to like hone in on? And so with the shadow of complexity in my pearl, like I do get caught up in the beauty of the complexity. It's like just magnetic to me to want to understand like the full depth, like to watch a 2-hour video about Saturn, like because I want to know all of the different little pieces. But at the same time, like like I kind of said at the beginning, like that level of complexity is not practical. Like it's very difficult to implement practical solutions when you have that level of complexity to contend with, versus if you have a very simple solution, it's a very simple implementation. So yeah, that's part of my essence, apparently, is to try to take complex things that I do really enjoy learning all the complexities, and then to boil it down into something that's simple and therefore hopefully applicable in our actual life to like make it better. Ooh, interesting. So Shay says, the last few years I've had Pluto in my second house, and I started investing both stocks and crypto. So that's really interesting, where the second house would be kind of our money strategy, and Pluto being a transformation and kind of removing our past wounding and conditioning and moving towards like who we really are and like our owning our power and all of that. So to like take your power into your hands and like start trading and like investing and stuff like that, that's, yeah, that sounds like a very fitting manifestation. Pluto in Libra, this is, I got way into this for a second because that's Dolly's generation. And I played her the Pluto in Libra part of the Book of Air. Or no. It was the Book of Water, where he talked about Pluto. And he went really in depth into uh, Pluto in Libra, and that basically like that generation is here to rebirth how committed partnerships work. So like the Pluto and Libra generation are known as like the children of divorce. It's like the first time divorce became like mainstream was under Pluto and Libra. So like obviously the people who are living through that time, Pluto and Libra exaggerated like where there wasn't harmony, it brought that to the surface and like made it unbearable to deal with. And lots of people got divorced during that time. And so the people who were born during that time, um, I don't know the exact dates of Pluto and Libra. It would have went up to 1984. And then I think it was like maybe this 1970-ish, thereabouts. I don't know the exact date on when Pluto entered Libra, but so a lot of people got divorced while Pluto was in Libra. And then because of that, these kids that were born during that time, they were raised in like one parent households or like shipped between like, I go to my dad's on my weekends and, you know, I spend this month with my mom during the summer and then this month. So like they got this upbringing that like hadn't really ever existed before, because divorce like just wasn't really a thing. Like if you were unhappy in your marriage, you just cheated on your spouse and stayed married. Like that was what you did. And for the first time ever, Pluto and Libra, people got divorced in like unprecedented numbers. And so apparently this generation, like they have this wounding of like what it looks like to have a dysfunctional partnership. Basically, is that at the time when Pluto was in Libra, there were tons of those because breaking your commitment just wasn't a thing. So rather than breaking your commitment and being flaky, I'm just miserable inside this dysfunctional partnership. And so these kids, obviously they're adults now, but they have this wound of what it looks like to be in that dysfunctional partnership. And supposedly they have this like transformation to make and like to find this new kind of relationship, or basically fashion a new kind of partnership that works for them, has harmony and has fairness and has equality and has the opportunity for both people to stand in their power. And if you think about it, like a lot of, maybe, I guess I wasn't even alive then, but like a lot of the divorces happening in the 70s and early 80s are coming off of like the women's movement of the 60s, where again, you did not break your commitments and there was not equal power inside those relationships. It was very skewed mostly towards the masculine. And so if you were unhappy, you just dealt with it. And by reclaiming more of their power, women are wanting a more equal position inside relationships. And if there isn't that, are more likely to leave and go and find where there is. Obviously, it's not just women who can be the less powerful one in a relationship, but that tends to be, I think, culturally where we see a lot of the disproportionate power ending up is more on the masculine side than the feminine side. But so that's where, like, as a generation, like, Pluto shows kind of like, what is your generation's wound and what did you come to, like, heal as a generation? And obviously that's where, like, the house placement gets into more specific than just the Libra side of it, since that is, like, probably like a billion people or however many at this point. Walking permission slip. That's basically like your aura. Like, your aura is a walking permission slip no matter what it contains. And when you're miserable and when you're suffering, you're basically walking around like giving other people permission to do the same. And when you're empowered and happy and joyful and facing your truth and living from it, then you're giving people permission to do the same. So, like, that was kind of where I was leaving the software company. And even a little bit before that, like leaving my hometown when I was 18, like I, I looked around at the people who were there and especially the ones who were successful. And I'm like, you look miserable. Like, why am I here trying to climb this ladder to get to where you are when you're not happy? And I want to be happy when I get there. So yeah, I don't want your permission to like work really hard and be really miserable and like, and then you retire and die. Like, I don't want to do that. I want something different. So like I went and put myself in situations where hopefully I was going to manifest something different. And at this point, I'm pretty much loving my life. Yeah. Yeah. Shay gave us this quote: "The truth shall set you free, but first it'll make you damn mad." M. Scott Peck, The Road Less Traveled. Yeah, that is a very Plutonian quote, very Scorpionic quote, is like to find freedom, to find your way out of hell, you do have to go through it. You do have to face it and deal with whatever it is that, like, a lot of times when people do wake up inside their spirituality, more of a law of attraction lens where there's this creator of our own reality, that can be a really tough pill to swallow if you look around at your life and like, well, that sucks and that sucks and that sucks and that sucks. Wait, I didn't make this. I would never make this. I would never choose these things for myself. But like when you like that's your reality and you are accepting that, yes, I did create this and no, I do not like it. Like that can be a really tough pill to swallow and can make you mad at yourself. And again, that's where like the work is in bringing ourselves compassion in those moments. Like instead of being mad and beating up on ourselves, can we be inspired to like try the next day to move 1% in that direction? Um, it yeah, it's all about our approach. And I think like the more we heal, obviously, the easier it gets. The more we're well taken care of, the easier it gets. Like if you're well fed and well rested and, like have abundance of alone time and you're engaging in your creativity and you're doing all of these passions and you're loving your life, and then you encounter an obstacle, that obstacle feels like this big compared to if you're low on sleep, you haven't eaten yet today, you had a fight with your partner this morning, you never have any time for your passions, like couldn't tell you the last time I even got to take a walk outside. Like when that's where you are, that same obstacle that could feel this big feels like this big. So much of what goes on in our life and more importantly, how we feel about it is 100% inside of our control through our self-care, through our psychic hygiene and managing our frequency, keeping ourselves feeling as good as we possibly can. Obviously, hard stuff still happens. We're physical. Ooh, Uranus is almost conjunct my progressed sun. So that's fun. I don't know a ton about progressions, but I would imagine that anytime you have Uranus conjunct the sun of any sort, it's a season of blooming into your individuality more than you ever have before. Um, Obviously, like if your progressed sun is at Taurus, and that means like your sun is in Aries in your natal chart, I think. So yeah, that individuality is going to look more like Taurus than Aries, but it is still your individuality, if that makes sense. Yeah, those kind, like, I try, obviously, I try to do it without the chart in front of me, but sometimes it can kind of fall apart. So the root chakra, I do apologize if your dismayed comment was about the butthole clenching thing, but yeah, this was out of a podcast that I watched last week. It was on the April 15th, 2022 prep playlist, and it's all about divine feminine and embodiment and like coming into your body and really like connecting fully with our own divine feminine. And so they were doing like a whole thing on how to get in your body and how to know if you are in your body and all of that. And so basically, Brianna is who was talking about this, is talking about like the base of your being, that root chakra, that like in order to be connected to the earth, that chakra has to be open and allowing. And that when we leave our body, that chakra closes. And basically and by leave our body, I mostly mean like you're in your head instead of being in your body, not like an out of body experience, anything like that. Although that could maybe apply as well. But it's like when you're in your head and thinking and planning and scheming and worrying and doing all of these things, you're not in your body. And so at any given time, this was the advice that she gave, was like, a easy way to know, am I in my body right now or not, is to check and see if the base of your being is open or is it all clenched up. And if you're clenched up, then you're not receiving from the planet, you're not receiving like from Mother Earth, basically, that like this planet is such a powerful foundation for us. And yet, if we're not in our body, we can't be connected to that powerful foundation. And therefore, like our own individual power isn't as potent as it could be if we were more connected into the planet. And so, in order to connect to the planet, we have to come into our body. And so, the butthole check is literally just like a yes, no, am I in my body right now? And so, when you check it, if it's clenched, relax your body. Take a couple deep breaths and like really feel into relaxing your body. And do that a few times a day for a week or two or three, and see if you notice that like now when I check it, mostly it's relaxed. And like that to me has kind of correlated and paralleled with like overall in general, I just feel slower on the inside, like in a good way. I feel like not as panicked and worried and anxious inside my mind. I feel more just like knowing the like well-being that is my reality. And I actually did a podcast episode. Maddie, if you want to grab the link off of Anchor, you can listen to it there now. Otherwise, it'll be on the YouTube channel on Wednesday. But it's called Releasing Guilt. And I talk about how for a lot of my life, I have had guilt as like this presence that's like almost like free floating guilt sometimes. Like sometimes I don't even know why I feel guilty, but I do. I feel guilty. And the other day, I basically noticed that I have like in me this spacious inner peace where my guilt used to live. And it wasn't that I felt myself like releasing my guilt. It was more like I felt this new inner peace that like wasn't there before. Because when I tuned into like this area of myself before, it was full of guilt, and that just mostly didn't feel good. And then I would kind of come back out and like distract myself with something else. Like, I don't need to be in there. But now, like when I tune into my body, like it just is like these increasingly like more, what am I trying to say here? Like just a stronger sense of well-being versus like that nagging, like sucking guilt feeling that's like, and you're like, I feel like I forgot something, but I don't know what it is. gosh, dang it, I feel like I'm forgetting something, but I don't know what it is. And like, there's no reason, there's no specific thing, and yet you still feel like you forgot something. And that is just like annoying as all hell when you have like a free floating emotion like that. And I've lived with guilt like that for most of my life. And so that podcast episode, I felt like went along really well with just like dropping into our body on a regular basis and like letting the well-being be there. Like, let peace be. That like your inner peace is already present. The only thing that ever stops you from feeling peaceful is like other things being louder than that. So like when we let all of that be quiet, the inner peace is like what's naturally there. Like our cork floats if we let it. And it's only when we hold it under the water with worry and all kinds of things that it stays under the water, and that doesn't feel good. And so, yeah, I feel like all of these different embodiment practices have led me to slowing down, to taking a deeper breath, to walking slower, to driving slower. And like all of this, it comes from a very organic sense of well-being. Like, I don't need to drive fast because I'm enjoying where I am. I'm not in a hurry to get where I'm going, so I can leisurely walk there. Like, there's all of these different outcomes, like not just a relaxed butthole. That's like really not the goal. It's more of like a, like one of those little things where you can like a tire gauge where like you just snap it on there and like poof, like here's your tire pressure. It's like that. It's like, are you in your body or not? It's just like a poof. Okay. Yeah. Little check to tell you where you're at. Oh, good times. I am also on the autism spectrum. Again, I find that it's helpful to a point. And again, everybody's got their sweet spot. Ooh, yes, please. In fact, the video I was watching was from a channel called The Life Autistic. I'm gonna have to check that out. 42, my wheel is literally turning half the map now. Yes. Oh, thank you, Maddie. Pluto was in Libra from 1971 to 1984. 42 is the answer to everything. And the sun in Pisces in the third. By progression, it's now 14. Taurus in the fifth. See, yeah, I'm gonna have to like. Progressions is one of those things where I have just barely skimmed the surface, like just enough to know that last year, I guess it was, in April, my moon progressed into Scorpio and my sun progressed into Leo in October. And so the moon progresses like every 2.5 years, I believe. It moves to this next sign. So it takes like 29.5 years thereabout to go all the way around. So I'm on my like second lap of my progressed moon. And the sun, though, only progresses 1 degree per day, which makes sense. I see. Okay. Pisces. Yes. So you must have like a sun in the very end of Pisces for you to have gone through like, because that'd be 14 years that it's been progressing through Taurus and 30 years that it progressed through Aries. And then your sun, because like my sun is at 28 and some change of Gemini. So like when I was 2 or less than 2, my sun progressed into the sign of Cancer and then was there for 30 years and then moved on into the sign of Leo. Yeah. Progressed moon just moved into Scorpio recently. I definitely felt that when my progressed moon moved into Scorpio. For one thing, my grandma died like I think about a week before that progression happened. And when she died, I went into like a 3 to 4 month hibernation. I would kind of say depression, except I didn't really feel bad. I just was lethargic. I didn't do anything, but I also didn't feel bad about not doing anything. So it was kind of like depression without the pain of that. I mostly just laid around and took naps, and I did so much in my sleep, I know, like in the astral realm and all of that. So yeah, there was a lot of processing and emotional emotional landscape that needed to be traversed, and that that's work that has to happen like internally in the spirit realm, in the emotion realm, versus like it's not, as far as my experience, it's not a super active outward place of the progressed moon. But like I said, like I know next to nothing about progressions. Thank you, Shay. 27 degrees Pisces. That makes sense. So yeah, we could figure up your age if we were so inclined to make you like 7, right? 3 degrees of Pisces, 30 and 14, 47. Yeah. Yeah, progressions, they're fun. I like them a lot. Okay, guys, I think that's all I got in me for this day. I really, really appreciate you joining me, and for your chats and your energy just in general. These transits that we talked about today are definitely playing out kind of over the rest of this year, even. But my video Monday will look at just these next 7 days and really focus into the Pisces energy, especially, and how the sextiles coming off of Pisces back to Taurus and Capricorn are allowing not only for all of this divine energy to come through, but for it to be grounded back into the earth realm through whatever we are being inspired to do in our physical reality right now. I think everybody's kind of facing a slightly different terrain, and yeah, super fun to hear everybody's stories. And if you're interested in being in an episode of Heart to Heart, shoot me an email. If you're in Patreon, we will be having our 4th Tuesday Sacred Circle this upcoming Tuesday. Please check that out. And yeah, I think that's all I got. So you all have a great rest of your day, and I will see you next time. Okay, bye.